I don't have an echo, so I'm sorry. Hello. I don't have an intro today. And the reason for that is because today I want to talk about Paul Twitchell, who was the creator. And I use the word creator in quotations here, but Paul Twitchell was the one that created Eckankar, brought the cult together, if you will, apparently did the writings, which we'll get into a little bit. And it's very, very difficult to find Paul Twitchell, especially in video form, of course, because there aren't any, but also even in audio form, it's just a little bit difficult. We don't have a whole lot of Paul Twitchell. And I have been blessed with the Google Drive of Eck, which I don't know who put this together. It seems to be a group effort of a whole bunch of people that look into cults, along with ex-members and other people. But holy man, they have done an amazing job. They have literally archived this entire cult from the beginning to now. They have everything you can think of. They've gone through all of the writings, found where they've come from, which I was already sitting here doing that by myself. And then I had a friend send it to me and say, hey, I know that you're already doing all this, but it might help you if you have this amazing drive. So I want to give a shout out to all the people that have put that together. Because, of course, they're going to be watching my video, probably not. But I just want to say it is a masterpiece, a work of art. And I honestly don't know if those of us who do this, talk about cults and try to speak out about these things, would ever be able to have been able to talk about this one so much now if it wasn't for these people that have put this together. Like it's an amazing thing. I am so thankful and so grateful that there are people out there that know to do this. And this is why I will never hate on certain A-loggers. So hello, Joe. I am very happy you are here. I know Eck and Scientology. See, the thing about that connection is before Paul Twitchell created Eckankar, he was actually a Scientologist. And there's some evidence that he and L. Ron Hubbard were actually not like close friends or anything, but they were at least on a talking basis. Both were sci-fi writers, so it makes sense that they probably, knew each other through that as well as through the whole Scientology religious seeking thing. And one thing about Eckankar that's been driving me nuts since the beginning, and I've mentioned that, is that it seems to be just a collection of like Buddhism, Hinduism, Christianity. Then you got some Scientology in there. Like Eckankar just basically stole from every single other religion and then was placed into like this pretty little bow, which is very much based on Vardankar, which is another religion that this is based. It's plagiarized. The whole religion is basically plagiarized, all the way down to even the writings of it. Not so much Harold Klemp, but of course Harold then based a lot of his writings off of Paul Twitchell's writings, as they do. So it's a mess. This whole thing's a mess, but it makes me laugh to think that both of these cults were created by a sci-fi writer who kind of went, oh, okay, I like what I'm writing here. I could probably create a religion with it. Hello, Iconic. Good to see you. I hope that you're having a good day. Hello, Shaw. I hope you're having a good day. Aaron, hello. I'm really happy to see you here. Oh, you're working a full day. Well, that's good for Buddy. I mean, take it, take it, take it. No, that does not mean there's no S on the end, which I hear now makes it so that that's not the same thing. But that's okay. You can ask about that. I actually didn't even know that was a thing when I came on here. So not all of us are that freaky. So I want to, of course, I think the first thing we need to do in this semi deep dive is go and look at the actual Eckankar website as it is right now, and see what they have to say about who Paul Twitchell is. Of course, just like when we're talking about Harold Klemp, everybody sees Paul Twitchell as this amazing being. And if you saw my premiere where we heard a member describe like this, I don't want to call it a like soul travel experience, but that's what she called it. I think she just met the dude at a gas pump one day, but you know, whatever. You could like hear how she like just saw him as this godly figure to the point where most of the story ended up just being a description of how amazing he looked and was. And it was like, that's not, has nothing to do with the actual story. So they very much put him on a pedestal of being this great, amazing person, which you'll kind of see as you see how they describe him here. So I want to warn you, this isn't exactly who he is. This is, of course, how those that are in Eckankar see him, right? There's a difference. So it said that Paul Twitchell introduced the sacred teachings of Eckankar to the modern world in the mid-1960s. The year was actually 1965, right on the dot, so exactly in the mid of the 1960s. And we're going to get into how they were not really sacred teachings, but anyway, he was born in Kentucky in the early part of the 20th century. Paul explored a variety of professions in his early life. Writer, promoter, military man? Is that a profession? Where's Zach? Can you just call yourself like military man? Can you put that on a resume? I want to know. I love it when you do these cult deep dives. That's my main thing. I find it very interesting. I find it all very interesting. I like to look into why are we here? What is this life about? What do other people say about it? Is there an afterlife? Things like this just interest me. And I find cults very, very, very fascinating. It's a well, that's it, Aaron. It really is. Like this whole website is. The whole Eckankar website. It's and it also still looks like something from 1995. Can I also complain as someone that's into tech? Can I? So it says he's writer, promoter, military man. I find that funny. Like, yeah, he apparently was a vet. A writer of sci-fi, like I said, a promoter. A promoter of what? I'm not really sure. It's hard to, again, find a lot of information about his past because it all came from him, right? So his destiny was guided by an ancient line of spiritual teachers known as the Vairagi Ek Masters. So it's funny because I'm sure now you're wondering, but if Paul was the one who created this and introduced these sacred teachings, how the hell were there already Ek Masters? Because you all have critical thinking skills, and I'm sure that that's something that just hit your mind. And if not, then you're sitting here going, yeah, wait a minute. That's weird. And again, like I said, that's because like Eckankar is not original. It is based off of other things. So there are other cultures and religions out here that have so-called Ek Masters. And that's what I mean. This wasn't original. So yeah, critical thinking would read those two at first paragraphs and immediately go, whoa, wait a minute, and then want to go and find out where Eckankar actually came from. The Ek Masters had taught truth since humanity's earliest history, right? So now you're like, well, what? but without the name Eckankar. So then you're like, oh, okay. So I guess Paul just like brought all of these people together and gave them a name. Is that what this religion is? Well, different paths accepted parts of it. They attach their own conditions and interpretations. Funny he says that because, as I said, he's the one that pulled from other religions, and then this is his own conditions and interpretations of all of them. But he, of course, needs to come up with almost a defense already as to why you would maybe look at this thing and then go, well, this sounds a whole lot like this other religion that I looked at. You know, I find it funny to kind of read through it and see that happening. Paul Twitchell's mission was to gather the scattered fragments of truth and restore them via the body of teachings now known as Eckankar. So what does the scattered fragments of truth mean? Well, that's his way of half admitting that he just went around to other religions and cultures and spiritualities and then stole things. And again, that makes me laugh a little bit. Paul ventured into a wide range of spiritual traditions under different teachers, which I just want to say, I want that. I think that that's probably a decent thing. Like, if I'm going to have somebody out here that's going to be preaching a religion, I would feel better knowing that they maybe went and explored other cultures and religions and had other teachers, and that it wasn't just like all just from them. I mean, maybe that makes it a little bit better. It is. It really is. And then people that get stuck in cults are just wasting talents on these cults. Instead, we talk about this a lot. It makes me sad. So, I think I do though want a person that's going to be a religious or spiritual leader or whatever you want to call them to at least have gone into a wide range of spiritual traditions, probably under different teachers. Like, that's probably the best thing about him, is that at least he did go and have someone else teach him. A lot of these cult people are kind of so egotistical. I don't know if they would be taught, if you will. So maybe that's a good thing. He separated the golden threads of wisdom from their cultural trappings. Now I have a problem. Because those in other cultures, like, they're not like trapping in. Because it sounds like he's saying that like the other cultures and spiritualities are like the ones trapping it in there. They're never shared out within the world, you know, they're just keeping them all to themselves. And then he came around and was like, let me help. Like, I don't like it. A spirited nonconformist. Oh. Okay. Paul called himself a cliffhanger. Like he gave himself that name. Right? Just like he gave himself the name Street. Yeah. An individual who lives in a high state of spiritual freedom and self-responsibility. Today, we just call that someone who's a spiritual person. There's a lot of people out here that maybe like they practice spirituality, or they have like a belief system, but they don't actually say like, I'm in this religion. You know, they're kind of like free spirits, if you will, where maybe they practice some things here or there, but you know, they're not like, this is the spirituality I am, and they put like a label on it. So I don't know if I'd call them all cliffhanger. I think that sounds like negative to me. Like you're about to jump off the cliff or like fall off of it into the depths of hell. I don't like it. Years came and went before his life-changing experience of God realization in 1957. Now, God realization is something that's been around for a very long time. And I might even just go in and do a little deep dive just on the whole God realization thing, because I think that that's important. But that's kind of what kicked him into gear to decide that he wanted to make his own religion, if you will. So, of course, in October of 1965, he became the Mahanta, the living Ekmaster of Ekankar. So, in other words, he was just kind of like, I am now the Mahanta, the living Ekmaster, and I'm going to create something over here. I can't find much information about how he became it, although I have not gone through the entire disk drive, so maybe there's something in there. But from what I can gather, like, there wasn't really anyone else that said to him, like, you are now a Mahanta. It sounds like he just, like, became, like, he decided. Ekankar grew from humble beginnings as Paul held workshops, gave lectures, and wrote discourses for spiritual students. He passed in 1971, and Ekankar had become a worldwide spiritual path and organization serving seekers all around the world. Still to this day. Now, of course, we have this little blurb, because like I said, we could find like some audio. Good morning, Auntie. Good to see you. I hope you're having a good day. Hello, Ken. Oh, God. Excuse me. Jesus Christ. Woo. Good morning, Ken. I hope you're having a good day. I know it's it's fun. Boot trolls today. Yes. Boot trolls today working. Yeah, Joe might have trouble. And I already gave them a hoo-ha yesterday so that hopefully they would not be here today. See what I did there? So we can find some audio of Paul, but like I can't find video. And that's why even the one that I posted up as a short is almost like an AI version of his picture, if you didn't notice, with his like audio to it. Because there isn't like video of him. There's not a lot of videos from before the 70s either. It's kind of a problem, right? But we can find some audio. And so this is his audio on Ek and the Individual. And I also want to remind you that they have built this website. So they pick what's put here and what you hear. Just want to remind you of that. That's important when we're talking about a cult. It's very selective what they want you to hear him say.
So you see, we have to work with what we've got.
Now, one thing you will notice is a lot of times you will notice, and Auntie, I know you're going to notice right away, just like I have, right? And you might have already, even in just those few words, is him and Harold Klemp have a similar way of speaking. It's not like the exact same, but in the inflection and when they do these like pauses, it's similar.
And this is a way that Ek works. It begins in the beginning in a very small way with the individual, and the individual knows that it works with him in whatever capacity that it can work. In other words, it fits with him in his life instead of the individual fitting with what we call the Ek or the spirit or the program. If we took everyone and said that we have certain standards and we have to go by these certain standards, then we would not have any success at all. But on the other hand, everyone has certain abilities, everyone has certain capacities, everyone have different viewpoints of life, different ideas, different states of consciousness. Therefore, our Ek fits in and works with the individual on whatever level he's on.
Yes. And this is why I am so nervous about this. I have to log off my name. My contractor is coming today. Oh, good. I hope that gets done. Yeah, there is a hypno cadence. There it is. It's hard to miss, right? At this point, because I've listened to a bunch of his audios too, and I'm like, geez, they have the same thing. Like there has to be a reason for that. Video from the 60s, 70s would not have survived to get digitized. That's it. The film reels were too valuable and got reused. That's what I mean. So exactly, anything from before the 70s, you're going to have a lot of problems getting. And to be fair, I'm not sure if they would have had a law, because when he started this, it was more of a private sort of thing that then like grew out. So I don't know if he would have had like videographers or people with video cameras that would have been recording a lot of his teachings. It makes sense that they would have maybe wanted to do like a recording of them on tape, which I believe is why we have several of these, and they survived a lot more so, right? But I don't think we would have people like recording him necessarily. So I don't know if there would have been a lot of it. And then, yeah, anything that there would have been wouldn't have survived. Scientology is Cyanon. See, and that's the thing, is that this does too, because this very much pulls off of Scientology. So, it's very similar. Some of the most potent mind control the world has ever seen. Yes. So the one thing about this cult that I find the most dangerous, and I say this a lot, is the fact that they say it's very open. So you don't have to change your religious belief system. You can be any religion and be an ek, according to them. They are, like Paul calls himself, a nonconformist, right? It's a trick to trick you into the cult, to then conform to the cult. There is conformity that happens here. It's just a little bit down the line, right? It's not right at the beginning. It's gradual over time. And so that's how it sucks people in. Even the people that don't want to follow a set of rules for a religion or spirituality might end up falling for this, because they'll look at this and go, oh, that sounds a lot better. It's not like Catholicism, where I have to go to church every Sunday and then kneel and sit and do all this stuff. I don't have to do any of that. I just have to go to some webinars and sing Hugh and then like do personal development stuff. Right? And I find that worrisome, because this appeals to even, the ones that maybe would see through the cultiness of a religion that's like, you have to not eat fish every Friday. Then we have this beautiful quote that says, we can look forward to a greater life than merely reliving former experiences. Because remember, Eckankar very much believes in past lives. And that's by becoming a conscious soul, handling the environment, body, life, spirit, or whatever you might call the Ek power, and participating in events of our own creation. Then life becomes the pleasure it should be and could always have been. It's a little weird of wording, but this is his whole thing, is that this is the one that will, do good for you, if you will. We are going to be diving into a little bit more, but I just wanted to take you over here for a moment to another screen. I don't know if this will necessarily work. Hold on here. Let me see. I think it should. Because I want to take a moment and just show you the Light Force Network. The Light Force Network is a society for enlightenment, and they don't just do like Eckankar, like there's other ones and stuff here. They kind of like sit around and talk about like all of the pseudoscience-y type religions and spiritualities that, I wouldn't trust, but that's just me. And I just wanted to show you, like, they have this beautiful picture of Paul here for when he was younger. Because the one thing that I do have is lots and lots of pictures. There's lots of pictures of him. But this is a very old and a little bit of an outdated site. It hasn't been updated since about 2017. So I'm not really sure what happened to it much. I've been kind of like checking in with it, going, what's going on over here? Because it says, Paul Twitchell, the modern day founder of Eckankar, And that makes me laugh because I'm kind of like, you can only have one founder. There isn't like a modern day founder, not like an old school founder. Like this is not like he's either the founder or he is not. So I just find it funny. But this is him as a young lad, if you will. And I think we're gonna get into the Light Force network here because it's interesting. And it is still going. I just don't know why their website isn't being updated. I just wanted to show you a lovely little picture of him when he was young. He wasn't an ugly dude, as the woman said. He was a decently looking man. You know, he dressed all dapper. And I mean, let's be real. If somebody is decent looking, they're probably going to get more attention and trick more people than if they look like a troll. So here we have the mission and writings of Paul Twitchell. Here's another lovely picture of him. It's one of like the main ones that I see used actually. And I have a little laugh at it because I can't help but look at it and go, Heil Eckankar. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, but I'm just like, ew. That's the anyway. When the ancient mysteries have strayed so far afield. Oh, hold on. I might need some music for this. I feel like we need to set the mood for this one. You know, do I have something that's... I don't want it to be too loud. I'm loud enough. Is that good? Can we hear my big booming voice? All right, let's do it. When the ancient mysteries have strayed so far afield that only distorted fragments remain in the public mind, then the order of Biography Adept sends forth a chosen one from among its band to restore truth, such as it is, in the material domain. In 1965, the time had come, and Paul Twitchell became the Mahanta, the living Eckmaster. His was a short, rugged mission. We got a little R&B here, but whatever. The high teachings of Eck had been scattered to the four corners of the world. Various writers had pieces of the true teachings, but often attached strings, such as requiring students to become vegetarian. Well, you don't want that. Or to spend many hours a day in meditation if they wanted to be true followers on the path to God. This was wrong for our day and age. So in keeping with his mission, Paul Twitchell showed himself to be the master compiler. That's what they call him, a master compiler. I know. He gathered up the golden teachings strewn around the world and released them from the cultural trappings and social aims which limited their spiritual radiance. I already told you I had a problem with that, but just keep going. He reoriented these fragments to show the direct path home to God. By 1971, he had established Eckankar as a world teaching. The fountainhead from which the Eck writings spring is the ancient gospel, the Shariat Ki Samad, if you will, compiled by the 9 silent ones, whose main duty is to gather up and sort out the unchanging laws that enfold every ripple of life, or in life. So. On the inner planes are libraries connecting to the golden wisdom templates. Getting that with the libraries on the planes. The library alongside the main temple on the astral plane, we've talked about that one a lot, is an enormous place of many roomy departments, much like the U.S. Library of Congress. I'm sorry, that made me laugh. Providing a comprehensive source of books and materials. Of course, they're all on Echo. Good researchers, such as Julian Johnson, Paul Brunton, Carl Jung, and others, have come in and selected the paragraphs that suited their audience. Few knew the source of their inspiration, but there was one who did. Paul? Paul's mission was to clarify, reveal, translate, and illuminate the sacred Ek teachings for all. And the great work continues on. Every article or wisdom note by the Mahanta, the living Ek master, is taken from the Shariat Ki Sugmat on the inner planes. Over 130 books later, yes, 130 books, 130, the writings of Sri Harold Klemp, we know him, continue to expand the body of spiritual wealth on earth. Oh, you thought I was done? No. Sacred writings inspire us. Yet by themselves, they will always be imperfect translations written in an imperfect world. The foundation of Ek is not in the physical writing. It's always within you. As the light and sound of God, the Mahanta can reveal all the truth you are ready to hear. He awaits your invitation. I don't want one. I'm good. I don't want to go to that party. I'm A-okay. So that, of course, is the mission and the writings of Paul Twitchell, which we definitely had to know what his mission was. I think that that's very, very, very important. Vegetarians are only a problem when they want to stop me from eating a BLT. Otherwise, they are fine. Right? I just think it's hilarious that he's like, he makes people turn into vegetarians. I'm like, well, okay. It's not the cause, but the militant zeal that turns me off. Exactly. Exactly. Hello, Guru. Good to see you. Excuse me. But yeah, I know. I just think that was like his example of being very scary. Also, I don't know of a lot of things that are actually like become a vegetarian. Like there's some like Hindus and things like that. Like, yeah, we can get into that shit, but it's like it's not enough of a worry that I think we needed that in print. He's fun. He's a fun dude. Gotta love these guys. They're great fun. The original lol cows should have been cult leaders. Okay, there you go. So now we have, of course, the story of Paul Twitchell. Again, I'm reminding you, this is the story as told to the Eckankar people and then relayed on this website. As you can see, who wrote this story? Who wrote it? Harold Klemp. Harold Klemp is the one that wrote this and then put it on the website. That should be all I need to say at this point. So Paul Twitchell was a person who had to, like, I hope fucking so. Jesus Christ. I got 4 words. I got 4 words. Paul Twitchell was a person who had to go through experiences of all kinds, like the rest of us, so that he would be fit to become the Mahanta, the living Ek master. To say he had a checkered life is an understatement. In many ways, he was quite a rascal. That little rascal, Paulie Twitchell there, just running around, like Alfalfa and them. A correspondence trail. In January, I got to look at copies of some of the letters Paul had written over the years. Harold, I hope you looked at that before. Anyway, he was an avid letter writer, and he always kept a carbon copy. Really? His correspondence was so diverse that there were times I couldn't quite figure out if this was the real Paul Twitchell or if it was one of his masks. That does not at all make me feel confident in Paul Twitchell. He wore masks. At one time, Paul made his living by writing for pulp magazines. He also wrote public relations copy during his stint in the Navy. He was always thinking, always writing. Yeah, because remember, he was military man. Sounds like a superhero. Military man! Tracking Paul through his letters revealed a unique, highly talented being. Of course, Harold Klemp would think that, though, right? Like that. He sincerely cared about spiritual unfoldment and growth. He went through volumes of books on consciousness, a subject which was not in vogue in those days. I mean, I guess good to know it wasn't trendy. In fact, it's barely in vogue today, but he loved it. And he thrived on the study of the different philosophies. It's interesting, I must say. That's what I do in my free time. Earth-shaking event. Sorry, I felt like we needed a sound effect. A couple of years ago, I decided, listen, Harold, why is this being more about you than fucking Paul here? I feel like I'm reading this. It's supposed to be about Paul, but for some reason, we're not hearing about Paul. We're hearing like what Harold thinks about Paul through this. And I'm kind of like, Harold, I don't care. Okay, I've already read your damn books. I've already deep dove you. Now we're trying to talk about Paul today. This is weird, isn't it? Am I the only one that's like sitting here like, why is it like this? All right, okay. So a couple of years ago, Harold decided to research Paul's past life, which he wrote about in The Drums of That. You have the book promotion. Who knew? In that life, because again, that's what you got to pay for. I'm just reminding you that there are books you have to pay for in this thing. They're not all free. They send you some. I had them sent to me for free. And then I have some other people that have sent me some and whatnot. But a lot of these you have to pay for. So The Drums of Eck, I believe, is one that you actually have to like purchase. So yeah, book promo. In that life, he was born on the Mississippi in 1811. At the moment of his birth, and I was Marilyn Monroe in a past life. By the way, I just thought you should know. At the moment of his birth, a huge earthquake rocked parts of the United States and reformed Reelfoot Lake in northern Tennessee. The earthquake of 1811 came at a time when the world was in turmoil. Napoleon was marching across Europe to invade Russia, probably in much the same way that Hitler, in more recent history, marched across Europe. The world was turned upside down. Funny you bring up Hitler after I did. I'm just saying. It was at this time in 1811 that a series of earthquakes hit the Midwest. But this one that formed Reelfoot Lake was actually the worst that ever occurred in the United States. Far more severe than the San Francisco earthquake of 1906, okay? So, like, don't even bring that one up. It doesn't fucking matter. This one was worse. It started in November, with tremors lasting throughout the month. More were felt in January, and some even as late as March. That's only like 2 months later, dude. They came in 3 main groups. The only reason there wasn't more loss of life or destruction of property was because it didn't happen in a heavily populated region. Okay? I mean, that's a good thing. I like that. I'm happy not a lot of people, were destructed. It was during this time that Paul was born into his previous life. Why does that sound so, like he was born into his previous? I feel like this is awful English or something. Like it just, my brain exploded when I read it. In The Drums of Eck, one of the books that we gotta buy, he tried to tell the story about his service in that lifetime. Even in his most recent life, he had a great fascination for the Civil War. So again, this is my whole thing. This is what they do, right? So they'll be like, Paul Twitchell was really into the Civil War in his life, so he was probably like a part of it. And this is how a lot of people like chalk up to their finding out their past lives. So it would be something like, wow, I really like the Beatles. Oh my God, I must have been George Harrelson in my past life. Like, you know what I mean? And it's like, that doesn't mean, but okay. He and his father used to have contests to challenge each other's knowledge about some bit of trivia. Which regiment did this or that? And they would try to match names and dates and events. That's what... Oh, Harold, always putting it in the most words that you could use possible. There are several different versions of the date Paul was born into this life. So again, could that maybe mean that it's a fake story? That's part of my issue here, is that people keep saying this about Paul. Like there's several different versions of this date. There's several different versions of this story. I'm like, that it can't be true. I'm sorry, when you're telling the truth, Mr. Truth Seeker Paul Twitchell over here, right? There's one version that's the truth. That's it. You can't have several. That's not a thing. Good morning. Like it, I hate that. It's really bothering me because it's not the first time that they've been like, there's a different version of, and I'm like, you can't have different versions of a date of your birth. Okay. You're not born on different days and different, like that just end rant. One person I talked to said the Twitchell family Bible recorded the year as 1910. They had a family Bible that they like wrote about Paul in, like he was growing up, and they were like, you are a Mahanta, we're going to write a Bible. I'm very confused on that. We need to look into that more. Another person who also told me he'd seen the family Bible said Paul's birthday was shown as 1908. Again, that's a 2-year fucking difference. I could maybe see if it was the day, right? Because in the next one, it says, it's amazing how certain each person was that he knew the truth. Each one claimed to have seen it with his own eyes. So by some accounts, he was born on October 23rd, 1908 or 1910. And then which other accounts give the date as October 22nd. So I could maybe see a little bit of a discrepancy with people saying October 22nd and then October 23rd, right? Those 2 days are right next to each other. And for all we know, maybe he was born close to midnight. And like this has happened before, by the way, especially in history. So it wouldn't have been that weird. That's my point. And like back in the day when kids were born like at right around midnight, they sometimes would get the date wrong. They'd do it the day before, they do the day after. So something like that, I could like chalk up to that. I could be like, yes, that is explainable. But you don't go for 2 years. Like, in 1908 or 1910, that 2-year difference. There is nothing to explain that gap, right? It's like, that's a big difference. You can't sit here and come up with like a good explanation for why people would mess that up. So to me, that just makes this whole thing fake right off the bat. You can't even remember the day of your birth. It's written in different places on your past life. Can't believe it. But, again, maybe that's just me. I doubt it, but it could be. Scientology is gross. Yes, today we're talking about Eckankar, which was created by Paul Twitchell, who we're talking about today, because I've dove into Harold Klemp, the current Mahanta, and Paul is actually the one that created Eckankar. But he was in Scientology before. In Boston? I don't know about that one, I don't think. I have to look into that. I hope everyone's okay, though. I don't like that. We don't really have that here. We have had, like, little tornadoes and stuff here, and that's, like, very worrisome. We don't get, like, earthquakes over here. So I don't really know what that is like, but I did have family that lived in Ohio. And when we were kids, they had an earthquake once. Yeah, I don't think it was like a huge one, but I do remember they had like, like some of the stuff in their house like fell down. So I like don't actually know about these earthquakes. But one thing I will tell you is it would not surprise me at all is if you went and did research on these earthquakes, is if like, what they said about the earthquake in history doesn't go along with what Paul's saying here, of course, because I don't think he lived through any fucking of these earthquakes. Like, this is a fake story to me. I'm sorry, but when you get the year and day of your past life's birth wrong, there's no excuse for that. That's something you should just know. So this is unscrambling the pieces, which again, I don't think you should have to do. This man should just had a biography written, and then that's it. Paul loved his privacy, which again is why there's probably not a lot of videos and select pictures on him. Early in his youth, he was involved in a variety of activities, but he made it a point to obscure any facts associated with his life. Do you want to know why? Because he wanted to lie about it and then make up all these past lives and stuff. That's why. Let's be real. That's all you're going to get with me. So that's why. In so doing, he left a trail so clouded that it's going to take our historians years to piece it together. Funny you say that, because as I said at the beginning of this, I have an entire Google Drive of some fabulous people that have spent several years. It had to have been. These guys have had to have spent years putting this thing together, where they have done just this. They've done a pretty fucking good job of figuring out Paul Twitchell. It reminds me of the philosophy of the tax protesters. Again, now we're hearing a fucking story of Harold. Harold, I don't care what it reminds you of, But anyway, with taxes being so high today, again, 2023, when did you write this? They go to great lengths to conceal their income. They won't use credit cards and rarely open any bank accounts. In a way, they feel they can protest against the tax system by not participating in it. Harold's like, I have a lot of friends that have paid taxes. And I'm like, that's not good. Tell them to fucking pay. But of course, they began to participate in it even before they had a voice in the matter, by way of a social security number. I mean, that's true. Yeah, you got to have you guys call it a social security number. I think in the States here, it's called a social insurance number. A tax protest or a tax protestor might reason that one way, tax protester isn't a thing, so it took me a second, might reason that one way to obscure your record is to provide the computers with such a mishmash or volume of information that no one could keep up with it. Harold, why are you trying to tell us how to get out of doing taxes? Jesus. You open a few bank accounts here and there. Now he's giving us a whole tutorial. Close one or transfer a little bit of the money to another. Buy up stocks or property, take a loss on one, and reinvest in another. Thanks, Harold. In a sense, this may have been Paul's philosophy in covering the trail of his life. Seems to be. He kept adding and changing so many things that it's taking a while to unscramble it and figure out who he really was. And I was very curious about the man behind the Mahanta, the living Eckmaster, who came out in 1965. Aren't we all? So, funny thing about this. You will notice that, of course, Harold, and then anyone else in Eck, when they talk about this kind of thing, because there's other people that have, of course, spoken on this that have been in the cult before, telling his story. So I've watched a lot of it. I've gone through. We know I'm deep diving this. Is when they talk about this kind of thing and how he did this to sort of make it so people couldn't research him. They almost talk about it like they think he did this on purpose, for his privacy. I'm not sure if that's true. I don't know if he actually did do this kind of thing on purpose, where he was changing things and adding in things and subtracting things about his life. I don't know if that was actually calculated for him to do, or if the guy just literally was always lying. And that's what happens when you're someone that lies about your fucking life, right? Is one time you tell the story, there'll be a whole bunch of differences. And then another time you'll be adding and changing the main parts of the story. Even when people tell the truth over and over again, there might be differences in a story where some things might be added and changed. But the main part of the story will remain the same, right? But this man changed everything just all the time. You couldn't figure it out. And I'm I don't know if that was on purpose, as it's sort of laid out to be here, as if he's a tax protester. Although it was information on my life protest, or you know what I mean? That's not what I think it was. And maybe you guys can let me know. And of course, maybe we'll change our minds as we keep deep diving into this more and more, as I plan to do. This isn't going to be the only time we talk about Paul. I gave you guys like 10 things on Harold. We're going to be here for a while talking about Paul. Maybe not today, but in future. So I don't know. I think that what Paul here was doing was, of course, just lying. So then you could never actually get the true story from him. And that's why everything is so different with ads and changes, and you got to like unscramble it. We don't get earthquakes. We get Florida, man. He could cause a whole earthquake, though. Yeah, don't forget Florida woman. She's just as dangerous, and there have been. Excuse me. You guys know I do some comedy here, so we've joked about Florida man a few times on this channel, especially in r/videos. That's usually when you can find us doing those little jokes. And I do believe in one of my Karen videos, there was like a woman from Florida, and I was like, this is Florida woman, because she was like nutso, and I was like, No, but if you do want to hear about Hubbard, I do have a deep dive on Scientology, and I am going to be talking about Hubbard a lot, as I am also deep diving Scientology a bit. They really want me to join. They keep sending me emails. So now we have Harold Klemp's biography on Paul here. Paul was quite athletic. He was short, of course, 5.5 feet tall. That is very, very short. With a very powerful upper physique. He was also rather bow-legged. Some people who didn't think so kindly of him joked that when he was walking down the street, you could almost run a billy goat between his legs. And that is actually a thing. I have heard that. Like, that is, we're pretty sure he was bow-legged. Like, he's even said so. So I do feel like that part is true about his life. I don't know why you would say that you were if you weren't, you know. But mind you, I guess maybe you would make up some victim story according to some of the people out here. I don't know. It's hard to tell exactly when he graduated from high school because, again, right, we don't have dates for his fucking birthday at times. Back in the early 1930s, the record keeping wasn't as accurate as it is today. Also because of that. Nowadays, if you follow the usual course of education, generally you will graduate from high school at the age of 18. But in those days, high school was the way college is today. You could quit for a while and then go back. Tell me if that's true. I don't know if I've heard that before. So Paul probably graduated from high school between age 18 and age 23. I don't know about that. I don't know. I've never heard anyone say that before. I'll be real with you. Like my grandparents, for example, my one grandpa, he only had a grade 7 education and my grandma only had a grade 3 education. So I do know, like back in the day, like school wasn't a necessity and it wasn't like today where you had to. Did Klemp cure his bow legs with that would be funny. Yeah, see, like Auntie says odd too. And I'm not trying to age shame you or anything, but you're a little bit older than me, and I feel like you would have also heard about this from family members who were like going to school at that time. I'm having a hard time. I've never heard of this. Like, you could graduate high school anywhere between 18 and 23. Like, my understanding is it was always you could graduate high school at 18. But again, maybe they weren't as into school, so maybe that's what he means. I don't know. I'm having a hard time with that, but okay, whatever. Now we're reading too much into this, maybe. So his first jobs after he came out of high school were as a physical education instructor. A little bit scary. He started with positions in a couple of different towns through the YMCA, which we're all YMCA. You know what that is. Around the same time, he was the director of municipal recreation in Paducah, Kentucky. I'm sorry, people of Kentucky, if you are watching. I don't know how to say that. Feel free to yell at me down below. Which in the book, In My Soul, I Am Free, was called China Point. Why didn't he just call it fucking Paducah, Kentucky? I don't know. Anyway, there is no such town as China Point in Kentucky. Again, so like, why did we do that? I don't know. He constructed the story to protect his family. Okay, that makes a little bit of sense. So that later on, when people sought him out to learn about Eckankar, his family would be pestered by well-meaning people intruding in their lives. Was it the well-meaning people he was worried of? Probably not, but you know. His own drum beater. Now that I could say about him is he did seem to beat his own drum. I'm not ashamed of my age, and continuing education after high school is called community college last time I checked. Yeah, like even at that time, right? When they didn't really have like college, university, and all that, you still had like community college, if you will. And it was like you would go and then learn how to do like a career. So yeah, I don't know. It was the same here in Canada. That's also why I want to ask you though, because you're in the US, and I was like, maybe it's different there, but I'm pretty sure we all had similar education. But he definitely was his own drum beater. He went and did his own thing. At the tender age of 27, not so tender, but okay, he decided it was about time that he got his name in Kentucky's Who's Who. This is a publication which lists the accomplishments of all the renowned people in the state: lawyers, doctors, geologists, politicians, and people of this caliber. So why the fuck would Paul be in that? Well, I'm wondering too. At 27 years of age, the most Paul had ever done was to teach physical education. But by the time he wrote it all up, exaggerating and twisting the facts, okay, he had worked up a nice little paragraph about all the grand achievements of one Paul Twitchell. He made it sound quite impressive. You can see why, after hours of reading so many dull entries, the editor of Who's Who in Kentucky thought Paul sounded pretty interesting. Without bothering to check out the dates or details, he probably said, oh, why not? And Paul gets into Who's Who in Kentucky, right along with the most distinguished leaders in the state. Excuse me, Mr. Harold Klemp, that wrote this. We already have problems, you and I, so I'm going to tell you a new one I got. Why are we telling a story of how this man lied about credentials to get into a magazine as if that is something to be proud of? I am not going to ever want to look up to someone who did that. I am not going to want to know their teachings. Like, I am not. So far, what I have learned about Paul Twitchell is he's a big fat liar. And that you want me to think he's great. You know, and I just got a problem. Never going to look up to someone that's like, I lied about all my credentials to get to where I am today. Because now to me, you just fake. And I can't trust you. I'm sorry, but like, this is not how to do it. It apparently works with other people though. So, you know, I'm calling bullshit on this. Over age 14, compulsory attendance laws varied from state to state. Yes. Yes. And like here, I know in Canada, back in the day, like I said, like my grandparents were going to school in like fucking the 30s and 40s. You know what I mean? Like back then, you weren't like necessarily forced to have school. Here in Canada anyway, like they didn't really care. But then by like the fucking late 40s, early 50s, yeah, you had to do like, you know, like public school. They would be like, do up to grade 8. That was what it was. And then as you're saying, which is about age 14, by the way, would be about grade 8 to grade 9, right? Then the attendance laws would have varied from state to state. And that was back in like 1915, you're saying? Yeah. So see, that makes sense to me. That does sound like how it would have ever been. 1875 was the first education law. So yeah. Yeah. And I know here in Canada, like it was very similar. And then by by about the 40s and 50s here, even, you were already going to school. Here, like I said, my grandparents back in like the 30s and whatnot, they didn't go to school. You didn't necessarily have to go. But I'm having a hard time though with how it was put here. But thank you, Auntie. The research is helpful. I like to double check. But yeah. So basically, we just heard a fucking story about how he lied to get his credentials into a magazine, and we're supposed to be impressed by that, like going, "Oh, great, good job, Paul." Then it says this was followed by a lot of dark years for Paul. That's what I call karma. It is important to recognize that one who is in training for mastership is a prototype of the initiates in Ek. Whew, I don't know what happened there, but I did get that out. When you say, I have problems, I am crying, I am weary, realize that Paul cried and grew weary too. Okay, so like the next time you're upset, you're supposed to just be like, that's okay. Paul was also upset in his life. In fact, there were times when his burden seemed so heavy that he didn't know how he could get up and face another day. Same. That's just being human. Congratulations, he was human. Starting as early as the 1930s, here we go, Paul was his own best drum beater. I know, a lot of you have dirty minds too, and that was fun, wasn't it? Anytime he did something, he would write an avalanche of press release about it. He promoted himself all the time. It's like, this is, again, so far, Paul seems like an asshole that I would want nothing to do with. When he was ready to go into the Navy, he wrote up a blurb about how Paul Twitchell has just finished basic training and now he's ready to go off to war. He sent it to the newspapers in Kentucky, to the local librarian here and there, as if anybody cared at the time. It's nice to know he was always egotistical and felt entitled, I guess. But without realizing it, he was just practicing. Someday he would have a chance to take his teachings. It's called Ekankar. Maybe he didn't even know the name then and put it in front of... I don't think he did. I think he went and saw Verdenkar and went, this sounds close. I'm just saying. I think that was more what it was. I saw an article in the obituary column in one of the West Coast newspapers a few weeks ago about a 77-year-old lady, not 27, who had, that's a big difference, we got like 50 years there, who had founded a certain church many years ago. But who ever heard of it? This talent of self-promotion was necessary for Paul's mission. The Ek teachings have been here from the earliest times, but they haven't carried the name of Ekankar. They have been brought out under different names at different times because they could not be presented openly. I don't think there was ever a time where people were like, we're going to kill everyone in Ekankar. I'm just saying. But at this point in history, they can. That's good. So Paul was advertising himself in any way he could, and in general, preparing for the future when he would use his talents to promote his books and articles on Ekankar. Is that what you meant when you said he was a promoter? Like he just promoted himself? Like he was a brobot or something? Paul Twitchell, the original brobot. It just seems so weird. Anyway, he basically is a big liar. In about 1942, during World War II, two major events took place in Paul's life. He got married to a woman named Camille Ballot, and he enlisted in the Navy and became a military man. Dun, dun, dun. For some reason, he never got assigned to combat duty. You don't say. I think it's because they probably thought that he was fucking insane, and they were like, we don't want to let this guy loose out here. Okay, listen, That would not be good, I think, anyway. When his Navy bosses discovered his gift with words, they put him into public relations. They're like, this guy's really good at lying. There are several photographs of Paul with prominent people. In one, he's with Pat O'Brien, who was a famous actor. And in others, he's posing with Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Frank Roosevelt, and General Eisenhower. There was more substance to Paul than appears in the current superficial writings about him by people who don't quite understand that he had something special. I guess even if he had to lie about it to get into the magazines. He and Camille were married in Providence, Rhode Island. That place should blow up. In 1942, when he got out of the Navy in 1945, they moved to New York. Paul wandered around a bit and eventually took a job with the Navy as a Washington, D.C. correspondent for Our Navy magazine. He kept copies of a lot of letters written from Washington, D.C. or the Washington Press Club, so we know he worked there for quite a while. I won't question him working there. Paul became interested in occult teachings around 1950. You don't say. You don't say. About this time, he hooked up with Swami Premananda, who headed the Self-Revelation Church of Absolute Monoism in Washington, D.C. Paul and his wife lived in the ashram on church property for quite some time. The cliffhanger! Again, I wish he would have fallen off the cliff, but whatever. He was in the Navy. He wanted fame, became the mistress and the owner of the billboard company. Do you know what, though? It does seem like he just ran around kind of like lying about himself in order to get noticed. And then he was like, I'm not getting enough attention, so I'm going to go become a cult leader. And then everyone will pay attention to me. Maybe I'm the only one that's reading it like that, but I just feel like that's a kind of a sum up of what we're reading here. In 1955, two more striking events happened in his life. I wish that when I was telling my life story, I could just say 2 things happened to me between these years, and that was that. He was kicked out of the ashram for some kind of misbehavior, and he separated from his wife. Oh, okay, so again, why am I supposed to be liking this man? This is like when you're reading a book and you're supposed to like care about the main character in the story, but the author like writes the person in a very bad way and they have like no redeemable qualities, and you're sitting there just like, why am I supposed to root for this person? That's what I feel like right now. I'm like, I am not rooting for Paul Twitchell in this story at all. He seems like a lying asshole. And now you tell me he gets kicked out of places and then probably got separated by his wife for misbehaving and getting kicked out of places. You know what I mean? So I'm like, why am I supposed to like this man? On July 4th, while Paul was in the kitchen of the Swami's church, he got into a fist fight with one of the other church members. So now he's also violent. Awesome. Paul used to work out with weights and was a very strong person. Was he juicing? Because that might explain some of this. I just want to know. But the other guy was just too big for him. Oh, he got beat up. We're going to get a whole play-by-play, apparently. That's the next paragraph. The fist fight started in the kitchen of the church, moved through the screen door, and ended up in the backyard. Being the smaller of the two, Paul could only try to defend himself. He attempted to run for the back porch of the parsonage, where he hoped to find some help, but the other fellow caught up with him. The fight resulted in a permanent injury to Paul's right eye, as well as a broken rib and general body damage. He was in such bad shape that some friends put him in a... Oh, sorry, I think that's the normal part now. He was in such bad shape that some friends put him in a car and drove him down to Florida. Then he became Florida man. Story gets better and better. Where it took him several weeks to heal. It was during this time that he got kicked out of the Swami's church. I can see why. They're like, listen, Paul, we can't really have you coming in here getting all mad and trying to punch people out and then getting beat up. Can you just go? Paul was a feisty person. Feisty. That's literally the word used. Feisty. He called himself a cliffhanger. We know this. Jesus Christ. Harold, really? This evokes an image of a man hanging onto the side of a cliff, high above the swarming masses who are lost in the drudgery of day-to-day living. I mean, that was a little bit much, but yeah. A cliffhanger could feel the wind and be close to the eagles. But he'd better not let go. This was Paul. Is that why we have our friend the eagle? I was wondering. At that time, he ran into Kirpal Singh, who was in charge of the Ruani Satsang. Probably mispronounced all of that because I was like, it'll be a really great idea with my speech impediment and all my disorders if I go and be a YouTuber. Paul said there were many masters who taught him. We sometimes like to think that truth is isolated, that it comes all by itself, that it has never appeared anywhere else in the world, and that it has never touched shoulders with anything else at any time. But truth builds up upon itself. It always has. In the old days, the scribes in the monasteries would say, this is wisdom, this is truth. And they would take the truth they found and use it as a springboard to go even further. That was deep. That was deep. Paul lost his way, but thanks to Eck, he found you. In late 1956 or early 1957, Paul had the experience that is recorded in the Tiger's Fang. The Tiger's Fang is apparently like, it's the big book here. They keep talking about it. I am looking for it. I found a couple of different versions, so I'm wondering, is that a thing? Because I want to make sure I get the right one here. If he touched the face of God in 1956, some people may wonder why it took him until 1965 to become the Mahanta, the living egg master. It's really quite simple. And this is when, of course, we're going to get the story of how this happened. Your habits and emotions have been built up over the years, and although your consciousness has gone far ahead, the emotions feel lonely. You feel truly left out. If Paul ever felt left out before, he must have really felt it after this experience. Even at the point when he had experienced God realization, as he returned from the inner planes, one of the Eggmasters said to Rebazar Tarz, Paul's teacher, so I guess that, was his teacher, I see he still has much to learn. And he was like, that's okay, though. I'm still going to go and meet up with, and make my own cult. I wasn't lying, I promise. See? I wasn't lying. I don't just make up things about people off the top of my head, I promise. Paul cared deeply about spiritual enlightenment. He continually tried, in a way that very few people ever do, to find spiritual enlightenment in all facets of his life. And finally, it came to him. Sorry, I felt like that needed some expression. But when you touch the hem of God's garment, God slaps your hand and says, don't touch that. You are never the same again. One of the biggest changes you find when you come back to the physical consciousness is that you are the only awakened individual in a world of sleeping people. Be woke. During these years, Paul Twitchell came in contact with Scientology and L. Ron Hubbard. They knew each other, and Paul learned a lot from him. Did he ever? Oh, did he ever? Strange as it may seem, even as late as 1961, Paul was still trying to find a shelter and a haven here on Earth. On the one hand, he had had the great experience of God realization. On the other hand, he was still trying to get baptized into the Catholic Church. Yeah, but I'm baptized, and I don't believe in that either. So, I mean, does it mean anything? But the priest wouldn't allow it because of his separation from his wife. In the 60s? Really? Really? I don't. Okay. I feel like in the 60s, the church was still like already kind of over that. I mean, if you had told me in the 40s, I would have been like, yeah. Hello. Thank you for the super sticker. I appreciate that. And yes, I know, don't you worry. But yeah, I like 61. Would they have still maybe in some Catholic sects, yeah. Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I'm reading too deep into this one now. Paul got outraged and wrote him a blistering letter. Later, he concluded that although the priests of the church are knowledgeable and intellectual, they certainly aren't enlightened. He was like, they won't baptize me because I am separated, so now, fuck that. Paul had his own view of enlightenment, and it was broader than that of the church. It was more like Scientology and L. Ron Hubbard style, you know. It's important that you know who Paul Twitchell was. It is very important that we all know who Paulie is. That's why we're doing this. There are things we have to look at. Mm-hmm. I think so too, Harold. But I bet you I'm looking at different things than you did, or at least seeing them for what they actually are instead of whatever this is. Because, again, no redeeming qualities so far here for me. Don't see them. We are initiates on the path of Ek. And as it says in the Sharia Kisabad, it's never the written works which are important. It's always the light and sound. The living, and I promise this is the last part of this, don't worry, then we're going to have a little bit of fun. The living Shariat. Anything in the material worlds is fallible and subject to error. The Shariat is merely a translation. Paul even explained that the Shariat ki Sugmad comes out in many different ways, with a certain person as the vehicle or instrument. It comes out as poetry with someone else. It comes out as parables and stories. And for another person, it comes out largely as prose. It is gathered by the 9 silent ones. It is drawn from the experiences of the initiates as they go through the lower world and meet the hardships in life. As Paul did, I feel like he calls them most himself, but anyway, and as we do. Yes, because everyone goes through hardships in life. We as humans have to start going around and judging everyone so hardly for hardships they go through and phases that they go through in their lives. For example, everyone experiences with drugs in their teen years and early 20s. Stop attacking people over it. You know, things like that. Because there's certain, you know, we all have a psychology of aging. At least that was the class I had to take to learn all of the different stages of life. And all humans go through very similar stages in life, okay? Throughout their life. And I do think we all need to stop judging each other for those things and all embrace that we all have problems in our lives. We all got problems, you know. And then maybe people like this wouldn't be able to like convince you that there's some kind of like murder or savior because they went through some things. And then when you go and look back at the things they went through, it was just things like they tried to beat up someone at a church and it got them kicked out. Not really a hardship, Paul, but okay. You know, as we meet these experiences, there is always something to be learned. Might be the only piece of truth that we had here, and it wasn't from Paul. Thanks, Harold. It reminds me of a story about El Paso, which is in West Texas. Thank you, Harold. Even as a Canadian, I was well aware. One day, a young man moved to town during a dry spell. It's nearly always dry, but when it does rain, it's constant. For weeks, there wasn't any rain. That's a dry spell, Harold. Very good. But when the rain finally started falling, it wouldn't stop. It just flooded everything. Why do you always have to tell me the same thing twice? Why? You tell me there's a dry spell, and then you explain to me how there's a dry spell. And I'm like, yes, I understand that. Just tell me the fucking place got flooded eventually, would you? The newcomer commented on this to an old man who had lived there for many years. The old man, who usually couldn't put two and two together. Why? Because he was old, Harold. How old are you right now, Harold? Aren't you a little old to be age-shaming old people, Harold? Came up with an interesting statement, which may have reflected the sum total of his observations in life. So obviously he was quite good at putting two and two together, wasn't he? He said, I spent 75% of my life praying for rain and the other 25% praying for it to stop. Holy fuck, that was deep, Harold. That was deep. This old man's viewpoint displays a certain degree of wisdom. The Eckmasters at the 9 Silent Ones gather a statement such as this out of each person's life. Some people have more than one statement. Some people have chapters of statements. Yes, we all have shit in our lives. Very good. These are distilled and put together, and they become the teachings in the books of the Shariat Ki Sugmad, which are always being written. They are not finished. They are not yet finished. Because, Harold's writing a bunch of them too. I would like to leave you with this. Thanks, Harold, for more homework. As you do your contemplative exercises tonight, because you don't have anything you have to do in this cult. But by the way, make sure that every night you do these exercises. Look to the inner master. Chant your secret word or chant and in the spirit of love and desire to know truth and to know the Sugmad, which means God, say, teach me thy ways, O Sugmad! Teach me thy ways, God! Imagine you actually believe in this, and every night you sit there and you go for 20 minutes, and then you go, teach me thy ways, God! Teach me thy ways, God! And that is your worship. I mean, you all thought that praising God through song and praying was weird. We got chants and weird prayers now. And then he says, may the blessings be. With yes, blessed be to you too, Paul Twitchell. Great way to pull from paganism now. Oh, blessed be. I'm like, Jesus Christ. You couldn't even stay on Eck for the whole thing, could you? Of course not. So, excuse me. I have been spending my spare time, which I don't have much of, but I got enough. I think Paul was killed by his wife and her boyfriend, Darwin Grouse. Darwin Grouse replaced Paul as the leader, and Harold took over with a coup and ousted him. And there is a lot of information on that. There's a lot of very, very sus information. I actually think that after I talk about the plagiarism, because I think that's a little bit more important, because we really do have to figure out, where this all came from. I think we do have to talk about what happened when Paul passed away and what happened when all of that went on with who was going to come out and be the Mahanta. Right? It's snowing. I have to work overtime. So I don't know what you're talking about, but I really, really hope that you don't actually mean not a peaceful organization, I see. No, it wasn't. And there was a lot of shit that happened when Paul passed away and Harold took over. There was somebody in between the two of them. There was a lawsuit. There was a lot here that we're going to be deep diving. And there is a lot of questions about what happened. Right? All right. I don't know what happened in chat, but thank you. I don't want to see it. Thank you. Thank you, Shaw and Joe. But this here is the like we keep talking about the Sugmod right now, and so I think it's important. I don't know if you guys can see this, because this is his book, and I have been reading through all of his books, right? Every single one of them. I'm slowly getting through them all. It is very important that I read through his works if I'm going to be out here and talking about them. So we were just talking about the Sugmod, the Ek, and all of the different things that all come together to make it. This is actually the Wheel of Eckankar, is what they call it, and it was created by Paul Twitchell in his spiritual notebook. As you see, he actually did have a whole spiritual notebook. That's what I'm reading here. It's 247 pages, and on page 12, they have this beautiful little chart, and as you can see, like, I'm not lying, and he basically admits they literally just took like Buddhism, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Taoism, like a whole bunch of religions and cultures, right? And put them all together in order to make this one. And I think it's interesting that you actually have like the Wheel of Eckankar, and that like they admit this, you know, like they admit, yes, this is a mixture of a whole bunch of this stuff put together. And then they plagiarize all of it. But then they also want you to think of this as an original, like, spirituality, and like as if Paul Twitchell is also the one that like came up with a lot of these ideas. Right? So if there's a lot of mixed messages that are being given to these members of this cult, anyone who is following this. And I find that a little sus. I do. But this is what they are talking about, whatever they're talking about, like the 8 different levels and all of this stuff. They're talking about this. This wheel has got a little bit smaller over the years. And again, we're going to get into that because there's like a lot of weird things that kind of happen in between Paul Twitchell being the Mahanta and then Harold Klemp being the Mahanta. Although Harold Klemp seems to have liked Paul Twitchell, he also like weirdly replaces him in some things. You know? And I find that interesting. I always find it interesting to look into like the leader and why they created this thing, how they grew up. You know, I want to find out what happened to them, what psychology led them to here. I think we do need to study that because we need to like make sure that no other kids go through whatever it was, you know? And I like to find out where they get all their views and their ideas from, because in most of these cases, all of these cults seem to just steal from other things and then create their own version, which I know it's fair to say that a lot of religions out there and spiritualities like do that anyway. But it's with the actual cults that do it, I don't know. It's done in a weirder way. I have an amazing video that I want us to watch where they are actually going to tell us, if you will, like the belief system of Eckankar. And this is the belief system according to Paul Twitchell. It's not him that's like telling the story, if you will. It is somebody else, but they are telling it like in the way that he would have explained it. This is on his writings, and I find it quite interesting because I like to be like, all right, so how did this thing start? What is the belief system here now? And I mean, I could sit here and I can read through all this stuff to you and bore the fucking hell out of you all day. Or we can watch a decent video in which someone like sort of explains it to us. I like to see how they interpret it. I also think that's important. How are the members like reading through this stuff and then interpreting that information? Right?
In 1965, a new religion called Eckankar was introduced to the world.
So yeah, as you can see, this is Eckankar, The Key to Secret Worlds by Paul Twitchell. And again, she kind of pulled from mainly his way of explaining it. We've sort of heard how friggin' like Harold explains it. We've gone through the website pretty well all the way through it, by the way. There's not a lot on the website that we haven't deep dove. I mean, I guess I could have just sat here and we could have gone through the whole website, but you guys probably would have found that more boring, you know? Come on, Queen of Spades, you know cult members can't read. Stop being ableist. That's great. So yeah, this is kind of where she pulled it off of. Is a lot of the stuff comes from this book here. So it is from Paul. This is like an interpretation of how this all began, based on how Paul is like put it in his writings, if you will. And again, it is a member. Excuse me, mute. Can you not do that when I'm in the middle of a word? Thank you. It is a member telling us about it, and it is important for us to sort of see how the members, again, read through this information, listen to this stuff, and then how they interpret it. Because they're interpreting it, of course, different than I am as a non-member and as someone that is a big, huge skeptic that doesn't fucking believe in anything, not even myself, okay? So literally, I think we got to kind of try to see it through their eyes in order to understand them and understand their psychology and what keeps them here. Because that's important to know too, like what brings people to this thing. And I think we've figured out that a lot of it has to do with, of course, like their own personal journeys of searching for meaning of life and what's going on in our world. But then it's also like the openness of this thing where you don't have to change your religion, where there are apparently no rules here, even though you're supposed to sit and heal like every single day and do 20 minutes of exercises. There's nothing you got to do to be a part of this thing, according to them, right? So, you know, we're figuring it out. And I think the last thing you got to kind of look at is, okay, now how do they interpret it all? Other than just being like, I, master, let me follow the master. And they called him the master. It was creepy. And what they think and how they put this together. So I'm going to try and play this whole thing now. It's only 5 minutes, and I'm going to try not to talk. I'm going to try really hard. We know I have to try not to talk. It's work for me to not talk more than it is for me to talk, believe it or not. So I'm going to try not to talk. Because I do think we got to kind of hear it from like the beginning to the end. Because it's the whole story. And you're going to even hear a little bit of Spade in there. And it's important.
Spirituality and the occult for magazines such as Orion, Search, and the Psychic Observer. In the mid-1950s, Twitchell claimed that Kirpal Singh's spirit, or light body, appeared before him numerous times in his Washington, D.C. apartment. His book, The Tiger's Fang, contains the teachings that Singh supposedly imparted to him during these visits. At least that was the original story. After reading Twitchell's manuscript of The Tiger's Fang, Kirpal Singh objected to some of its contents. That is when Twitchell broke with Rouhani Satsang and set out to found Eckankar. In order to make this new religion appear unique, he had to disguise its origins in Ratswami Yoga, the school from which Kirpal Singh and Rouhani Satsang emerged. Twitchell began to reissue the articles that he had submitted to various magazines, only this time he changed the names of the people who had appeared in the original versions. Thus Kirpal Singh became Sudar Singh, and Swami Premananda became Rebazar Tars. These revised articles and invented masters formed the basis of the religion of Eckankar. Not only did Twitchell create imaginary spiritual masters and claim that Eckankar was the only true way to enlightenment, he
This is the part of the video where I was like, I like this.
Claimed that he was the living Ek master, or borrowing a Hindu word, the Mahanta, the highest of all states of consciousness. In addition to Twitchell's fantastic claims, large portions of the Eckankar books that he wrote are plagiarized. One of his sources was The Path of the Masters by Julian P. Johnson. In this example, we see how Twitchell plagiarized one of Johnson's paragraphs almost word for word. It is through the plagiarism and inconsistencies in Eckankar publications that David C. Lane, an undergraduate student at Cal State Northridge, was able to expose Eckankar as a fraud. In 1977, noting the similarities between Radhaswamy and Eckankar, Lane wrote a term paper comparing the two for an undergraduate religious studies class. Lane sent a copy of his paper to Eckankar headquarters, which at the time was located in Menlo Park, California. After Twitchell's death in 1971, Darwin Gross became the living Eckmaster. Under Gross's leadership, Eckankar threatened Lane with a lawsuit if he were to publish his paper. Lane continued his investigation, and in 19...
I am going to say in future we are going to go over that lawsuit. We are going to be going over the lawsuit.
1979, he published a limited edition of The Making of a Spiritual Movement, The Untold Story of Paul Twitchell and Eckankar. It was Lane who uncovered Twitchell's invention of the Eckmasters. Lane's book thoroughly catalogs the instances of plagiarism and fictionalization in Eckankar books. The leadership of Eckankar apparently does not want the truth about its origins to become known, as this would certainly cause some members to leave, and members are how Eckankar makes its money. The members of Eckankar are either unaware of or are not bothered by the lies upon which their faith is founded. Of course, members do sometimes leave, but there is heavy indoctrination against this. Ford Johnson, a prominent Eckist, recently left the religion after 30 years and wrote an expose. In his book, Confessions of a God Seeker, he cites some of the threats in Eck literature that are meant to discourage members from leaving. In this example, members are warned that they will face spiritual decay and even health problems if they leave. Harold Klemp, Eckankar's current leader, has also admonished those who are having doubts about the religion, indirectly referring to them as weeds. If you are interested in learning more about the origins of Eckankar, visit one of these websites.
I love the Truth Seeker. Highly recommend going there. So that is literally, that's the full truth. That is the full truth as given to us by ex-members. I know, I said they were members, they're not. So here I want to do a little bit of a rewind time. Because a lot of people seem to think that I was just like a bored housewife, and I was like, I need more content. Drama doesn't pay enough or something. So I was like, I'm going to go find a religion, and then I'm going to tell everyone it's a cult when it's not. And people have been coming here and accusing me of making Eckankar out to be a cult when it's not a cult. People have been trying to speak out about Eckankar publicly since the 80s. Maybe even the 70s. It's just, I can for sure say the 80s. So, with that proof, I want to give to you this. Eckankar revisits the movement. This is important. This article came out in 1995. And I want to read through it. But I'm not just out here looking for religions to turn into cults. Scientology is already a cult. Just like Earthly Wellness is a fucking MLM company that lies about not being an MLM company, and you all fell for it. Bunch of people got taken by modern alternative mama out here just to attack me. It was great fun. I got to sit down and watch a bunch of skeptics stick up for modern alternative mama of all people because they thought that they were like giving it to me, right? They're like, Queen's trying to make out this thing that isn't an MLM into an MLM and talk bad of this poor Kate lady. This poor Kate lady is telling her she's wrong. It was fucking hilarious. I got to just sit back and enjoy it. Yes, this is the Queen of Spade cult meeting. Welcome. So this is an article from 1995 in which a former Eckankar member revisits this cult and what it has done. So as you see, the published date is literally June 22nd, 1995. And I wanted to read this to also make my point that this has been spoken out about long before I was ever a content creator. I just might be one of the main content creators now that's sitting here that's like talking about it and deep diving it so much, other than a few people that are ex-members, including King David Project, who is an ex-member. So this is something that people have been speaking out about for a long time. We use more discriminating intelligence when we buy a used car than when we buy a religion, says philosophy professor and cult buster David Christopher Lane, someone I adore. Buying a used car, you at least look underneath the hood, hit the tires, maybe take it to a mechanic to check it out. But in buying a religion, you're supposed to wear these narrow blinders so that if anybody disagrees, you can block it out. It's basically check your brains at the door when you join a religion. For the past 20 years, Lane's books and articles accusing several new religious movements of plagiarisms, lies, inconsistencies, and scandals, God, I love him, have raised a fury among true believers. According to Lane, members of various cults, Lane's the one that had his house broken into, by the way. According to Lane, members of various cults have threatened lawsuits, written him letters with skeletons on them, broken into his apartment, you saw that, sure, made death threats, and generally have harassed him. And this is hilarious to me because we all get that. I don't need trolls. I literally do not need trolls. I have Hubbard galore. I have Scientology coming for me. I got Eckankar coming for me. I don't think people out here realize that I don't give a fuck. And then I have people that are like, well, why would Scientology come after you? Are you dumb? You could be a person with 2 subs and speak out about that. And they will try to come after you. What I want to know is, do you want to hook up with the cults to come after me? Or do you want to help me speak out against them and stop them? That's for you to decide. So, love David Lane. Lane's no longer an easy man to find. He lives in the San Diego area, but the location is a closely guarded secret. He has no phone. I actually kept my phone for years until one night when you're asleep and you've got to get up at 4 a.m. and go to school, and you get a phone call saying, we're going to fucking kill you. You know what I mean? It gets tiresome. Again, this is David Lane. David Lane is fabulous and has gone through fucking hell to speak out against these things, literally. And the anti-cult community owes a lot to David Lane. And he almost doesn't get enough, enough thanks for what he's gone through to speak out against these things. Because none of us do. For 10 years, I was a member of Eckankar, one of the groups Lane has written about most extensively. His critique was instrumental in my dropping out of Eckankar in the early 80s. David Lane has saved a lot of people from cults. I anticipate our talk with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. Apparently, Lane has equally conflicted feelings about me. Initially, he refuses to come to the Hillcrest home where I'm staying, preferring to meet in a nearby restaurant. Because David Lane has been through hell, and no offense, he's probably not going to feel safe coming to anyone's home right now. This wasn't going to happen. Since I don't want to play the awkward game of trying to figure out who one another is in public, I haggle. I'm worried about getting lost, he says, exasperated, but it's just a few blocks off University. Finally, he agrees to come to the house. But I'm doubtful that he will really appear. With only a post office box and an answering service to connect me to him, Lane seems as slippery as Houdini. With a blink of an eye, he could vanish forever. Lane does arrive at 1 o'clock Thursday afternoon on time to the minute. I open the door to a boyish 38-year-old with a full head of healthy brown hair. He's told me he surfs, and in his knee-high length khaki shorts, plum-colored t-shirt, and sandals, he looks like a surfer. His clothes seem to be tossed onto his rather stocky body. He extends his hand and smiles broadly. Hi, I'm Dave. Sizing up his clean, homogenized attractiveness. No one's described someone like that in a long time. I think, tuck in his shirt, and he could be one of those infomercials beside a pool selling motivational tapes. How to lose weight, gain friends, make it rich in real estate with no money down. No, David Lane would never join an MLM. Don't do that. We spent roughly 9 hours together, spread over 2 days. Sitting at a table outside Monsoon at Village Hillcrest, surrounded by potted plants and curving walls of mango orange, gold deep purple, and rusty red, Lane sips a Coke and tells me the history of his involvement with alternative religious movements. So there's been a few pictures here that I just want to go back and go through, other than David Lane, of course. This here, of course, is Paul Twitchell. And he said, it's the little blurb under says, Paul Twitchell, Lane discovered information that led him to believe that Twitchell copied whole chapters from other texts, like just all other texts, lied about biographical details. So David Lane was one of the first persons too who kind of like tried to figure out who the hell Paul Twitchell was, and found that there was like a lot of lies and things that he had said about his past that you like couldn't figure out if they were true. And like, he's just a big liar. This here is Reb Azar Tars, who was, of course, Paul's teacher. And this here is Charles Richards, who says David Lane is making a name for himself by being an antagonist to Eckankar. A lot of people had an issue with that. Harold Klemp, the rod of power, has passed on to Harold Klemp. Within 2 years, Klemp fired Gross, accusing him of negativity, spiritual decay, and embezzlement. Which, again, we're going to get into all of that in future, because it is very interesting to see how Harold kind of like punched his way into being the Mahanta. But before we do that, I think we do need to know who like Paul Twitchell is, and then lead up to the point where, you know, of course, Harold then takes over when Paul passes away. At 17, Lane, who was raised Catholic in the San Fernando Valley, became interested in Radhasyami, which I've also said wrong, a branch of Surat Shabd yoga founded in India in the 19th century. In 1978, after 5 years of study, he was initiated into it in India by the late, this person, Maharaj Charan Singh. In 1977, noting the similarities between Radhasyami and Eckankar, a religious movement founded in San Diego in 1965 by the late Paul Twitchell, Lane wrote a term paper comparing the two for an undergraduate religious studies class at California State University, Northridge. In the course of his research, Lane discovered information that led him to believe that Twitchell copied whole chapters from those texts, lied about biographical details, and misled people concerning the origin of Eckankar's doctrines. And my whole thing is, if you can't even trust the origin of the doctrines, can you trust the doctrine? She hasn't had it in person. It will be on OConnect. As soon as OConnect gets started, we'll start doing cult meetings. So, I mean, it's almost like you can't even trust the origin of the Eckankar doctrine. So can you trust Eckankar? This here is Bettina Yellman, who said that she received her dream state while at an X seminar in Hawaii. Yep. Just in case you wanted to know. Lane leans across the cafe table, excitedly tapping his straw. I found all this fun, interesting stuff. I talked to Twitchell's first wife. Nobody knew he'd been married before. I was excited, 20 years old, in the moment of discovering something new. I had huge phone bills because I had called this professor or this person. So I sent my term paper to Eckankar, and then they turned around 2 months later and said they were going to sue me if I published it. But you published it anyway. I had Eckankar on my dog, Harold. Yeah. It's scary to look at Harold Klemp's pictures. Some soldiers go to war with a picture of their wife or girlfriend in their helmet. I went to war with a picture of Harold Klemp in my Kevlar helmet. I'm sorry it is scary. And not just scary like it is for me, because I find him to just be a ugly and turtley looking dude. And every time I see him, I'm like, Harold Klemp, woo. But it would be very triggering to see him. And I don't want to trigger anyone, but we gotta unfortunately see him as I'm deep diving this. The good news is David Lane here was not scared of attorneys. His family was full of them. Naturally, the threat made him want to do more research. If they're going to sue you about a 120-page term paper when you're 20 years old, you know something's up. We think the same way. If they're going to come after you and try to silence you, obviously something's going on. You must be on to something. So you got to keep on going. Going to be waiting a long time for the next meeting, right? I mean, it will be. Sorry. Now, this here is actually Darwin Gross, Gale, after Twitchell's death. Married his successor, Darwin Gross, in dynasty-like power play that troubled and thrilled the faithful. Again, we're going to get into who that is and everything to do with that, because it's very, very important. So, of course, when you're 20 years old, you know something's up. When you're 30 years old, same thing, by the way. You go, people are trying to silence me. I must be on to something. I better speak real loud. Do a lot on it. Tell the whole world 5 million times until they listen. I mean, it wasn't really working with TCAP, but I just keep trying. The following year, Lane wrote a second paper, The Making of a Spiritual Movement, The Untold Story of Paul Twitchell and Eckankar. Let me know if you want me to read through that. That could be fun. I was obsessed, Lane admits. I was on the holy grail of research. And honestly, we love David Lane here. Through a process that Lane himself does not completely understand, someone photocopied this manuscript and circulated it around the country. As the great Houdini wrote, the yellow thread of exposure seems to be inextricably woven into all fabrics, whose strength is secrecy. As is the case with all cults and community movements that want to be cults. Houdini, like Lane, was a man whose obsessions drove him to expose religious frauds. We'll get there too one day, maybe. James Peebles, an Eckist and fellow classmate of Lane's, also wrote a paper on Eckankar. The two students shared notes. Peebles, says Lane, got so disgruntled when he realized there was some kind of fraud being perpetrated that he wrote Eckankar himself about those findings. Peebles returned to his Baptist roots and sent his paper to Professor Ed Gruss of the Los Angeles Baptist College. An Eckankar representative claiming to be a member of the Berkeley-based anti-cult group Spiritual Counterfeits Project asked Gruss for a copy of Peebles' report. The report made claims of tax irregularities and personal misconduct by an Eckankar leader. Eckankar then threatened Gruss with a $2.5 million lawsuit for publishing Peebles' paper and for making a photocopy of it. I wonder how much they would sue me for all these videos. In the meantime, Lane graduated from Northridge, visited India, and enrolled at the Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley, where in 1979 he met Brian Walsh. He wanted to make my research more available, so he put up $1,000 and out comes this funky Xeroxed, a self-published book with a weird cover. Xeroxed. Jesus fucking Christ. Within 3 weeks of its publication, The Making of a Spiritual Movement sold out. And again, I am actually reading through The Making of a Spiritual... I'm reading like 5 different books right now on this thing. Around the same time, the Spiritual Counterfeits Project published its own journal, Eckankar, a hard look at a new religion, based largely on Line's manuscript, which they distributed to nearly every X center in the world. Disillusioned, Eckes left the movement in droves. Eckankar set up a meeting with Lane at its international headquarters in Menlo Park. So they were like, listen, Dave Lane, you are coming to the main place. All right. Oh my God. I don't even know what I would do if David Miscarriage was like, Queen of Spade, get down here. I'd be like, ah. But that's what happened. He's out here. He's spread the word about how this is a cult. And they're like, you, get down here to the international headquarters. That's the main one, you know. I would have had a heart attack. David Miscavige, please don't do that to me. Harold Klemp, please don't do that to me. Were you nervous? I asked. No, I was excited that somebody would pay attention to my research, Lane exclaimed. I think they expected somebody who was more academic looking. This was 79, so 15 years ago, which even longer now. This was in 1995. I looked like a little kid. I'm a surfer, so I had this surfer hair and a turtleneck. They were dressed up in suits. They had this little tape recorder, and I was impressed. I thought it was very professional. It was very professional for 79. And they looked at me like, what's this geek doing? We sat down, and they were really uptight because they knew the impact of my research. So I said, you guys can get out of this simply. Just explain that Twitchell plagiarized. And just explain that Twitchell covered up his life. The upshot of it was they didn't do anything. Except now they kind of admit, as you saw, that Twitchell covered up his life a bit. They still won't admit to the plagiarism to this day. They will not admit it. But they will be like, oh, well, Twitchell was just like, you know, trying to cover up his life for privacy's sake. He knew growing up and everything that he was going to run this cult. So, you know, he was protecting. It's like, no, that's not a thing. But anyway. Lane tried in vain to place his controversial book with a major publisher. And I don't know why. This is why major publishers suck. In 1983, Lane and Brian Walsh issued a glossier version of The Making of a Spiritual Movement, which I am reading, through their own Del Mar press. Eckankar threatened a lawsuit for the inappropriate use of their trademark symbol on the book's cover, because what else could they fucking do? Right. With the popularity of the Ghostbusters logo, Lane and Walsh had put a circle with a slash through it over Eckankar's logo, which is Eck formed into a circle. So they did the Ghostbusters logo, which of course is the ghost with the circle with the line through, like the no ghosts. I ain't scared of no ghosts. You know, that thing. They basically did that with Eck. So it was the Eck symbol, and then they had like the it crossed out. Del Mar Press agreed to change the cover on future editions. Because you can't get sued if you're just like, okay, fine, we'll change it. So that never really happened. The Making of a Spiritual Movement, which is not advertised or available in bookstores, has sold more than 10,000 copies. I'm unsure if it's advertised or available in bookstores today. Of course, I'm reading this from 1995. Remember, we are time traveling. Just like the Ekis. But I do have a copy of it. You can get a copy of it online here. And when I do go get into it with you guys, I will, of course, leave a link so that you too can go and check it out. Finally, in 1992, Garland, a publisher of hardback reference books, accepted Lane's manuscripts for its library series. Eckankar got wind of the new edition, and their lawyers began corresponding with Garland, although the book was already typeset. Garland decided to withdraw it. Lane's green eyes turned serious. Be very careful with Eckankar. When they find out you're talking to me, fuck, I would love to talk to Dave Lane. I guarantee that their lawyers will write. I'm sure of it. He taps his fingers on the table. Actually, Eckankar is the one who has kept me going because they keep after me every time I try to come out with something. They sent letters about me claiming I was the negative force, that I was predicted from the beginning of mankind. David Lane, the devil! In just one of Paul Twitchell's books, The Far Country, Lane claims to have found more than 400 plagiarized paragraphs. Lane smiles to himself as if he were envisioning Paul Twitchell hunched over some Radazami text scribbling away. I don't mean just an idea or a thought. I'm talking about the reproduction of grammatical mistakes and semicolon misuse. Not only did this thing plagiarize the books, they even plagiarized the problems with it in the books. I'm talking about the very form that the truth being copied, not the truth itself. I don't know what that is. None of us know. No, I mean, we can't all be over here saying we all know the truth, okay? So who was the mysterious Paul Twitchell? He claimed to have been born on a boat. He was on a boat on the Mississippi a few minutes after the great earthquake shook the Mid-South and formed a lake in its wake. Such a quake did occur in 1812. Twitchell told his second wife, Gail, that he was born in the early 20s. It's actually been told that he lied to his second wife about her age, about his age. She was apparently a fair bit younger, and he was a fair bit older and lied to her. So, she wasn't even aware with how old he was the whole time that they were married. Which, again, that's a little bit... Satan, yes. David Lane, the Satan of Eckankar. I love it. The kryptonite. But he did lie to her. And again, this is what I mean when I say this man has no, good qualities about him. It's he lies about his past. He lies to get into magazines. He lies to his own wife about his age. He plagiarizes every single fucking thing he's ever written, which he then uses to go and, get people into a fucking cult, of all things. No redeeming qualities. No one. No one. But for some reason, even, when Harold Klemp put this story out to us, he was telling it in a way we should have been proud of Paul Twitchell for these, accomplishments. Even the fight at the church was put in a way that was supposed to be oh, that's just little Polly Twitchell being all rambunctious. It was very strange. Lane's research indicates, however, that Twitchell was born between 1908 and 1912 in Paducah, Kentucky. During the 30s and 40s, Twitchell was a prolific writer. He's listed in Ripley's Believe It or Not. He is. He's in Ripley's Believe It or Not as having sold an article every day. He is one of the people that have published the most articles in the world. The Courier Journal magazine, to which he was a regular contributor, reported that he sold 1,800 stories and articles in 3 years, which is what landed him in the Ripley's Believe It or Not. In 1942, after a stint in the Navy, because remember, he was military man, Twitchell moved to New York, where he continued his journalism career, attended many churches, and read extensively on spiritual subjects. A job as a correspondent for our Navy took him to Washington, D.C. in 1945. There he and his first wife, Camille, when he lied about his name or his age to, joined the Self-Revelation Church of Absolute Monism, a system of yoga founded by Swami Premananda, because I can never say that right. In 1950, the Twitchells moved to the church compounds. Yeah, there was a compound. Yep. But 5 years later, Twitchell was asked to leave the church for personal misconduct because he got into a fight at remember, in the kitchen? That same year, he and his wife separated, and their divorce was final in 1960. After leaving the Self-Revelation Church, Twitchell dove into the Radhasamimi movement. It's a yoga teaching that, according to Lane, is designed to enable the soul or consciousness to ascend beyond the physical body to higher spiritual regions by means of an internal sound or life current. Wow, that sounds exactly like Eckankar. It's amazing. Central to the teachings of this, continues Lane, is the necessity of a living human master competent in initiating disciples into the practice and technique of listening to the inner sound, contemplating the inner light, and leaving the human body at will, which they claim the Mahanta can also do in Eckankar. The Indian guru, Mr. Singh, figures prominently in Twitchell's early writings. 8 years later, he broke with this dude, Mr. Singh, and therefore denied any involvement with him after he basically stole most of the basis of Eckankar. Right? So he stole the basis of Eckankar from them and then detached from this dude and then was like, him? I don't know him. What do you mean? I don't know him. Nothing came from him. It's like, shut up, Paulie. Shut up. In the late 50s, he became a staff member of L. Ron Hubbard's Church of Scientology, another association that would later be denied. Because again, Eckankar is basically these two things mixed together. If you took Scientology and Radhasamimi, or however you say it, and put them together, like the basis of those beliefs, it creates the basis of this belief system. So he basically just like went in and stole a bunch of their shit, right? It was like, hey, Ron, thanks for being my buddy, man, for having me work here. I learned how to run a cult from you. I'm going to go run my own. And we see that a lot. It's funny, actually. There's a lot of cults that L. Ron Hubbard and Scientology have been pumping out. Twitchell married his second wife, Gail Atkinson, in San Francisco in 1964. And again, a lot of people thought that that was his first wife. They weren't even aware that he was married before Eckankar. Apparently, he kept that a secret from everyone. Shortly afterward, Twitchell claimed a 500-year-old Tibetan monk, Rebazar Tars, appeared to him and instructed him to move to San Diego. He was living in Point Loma in 1965 when he started teaching workshops and selling booklets on how to leave your body, to do soul travel, right? And go to the spiritual planes. He became the 971st living Eckmaster. Eckankar, the ancient science of soul travel, was officially founded. And that is what initially got me kind of into it too, is that they called themselves the ancient science. And I was like, oh, what science do we have here? You've interested my STEM girl mind. There's none. There's no science. Not a bit of science to be had. This whole thing is run on absolute and complete pseudoscience. Yes, there is a lot of cringe with Scientology. This is Eckankar, which came from Scientology. For a year and a half or 2 years, says Lane, it was a shoestring operation. He was advertising in Fate magazine, Orion magazine, and Cosmic Star. And again, this is why I'm saying, like, when this thing first started, like, it wasn't like he would have had like news press there or like people with videographers to be able to record all of his speeches and all of these teachings he was doing. A lot of it was on like tape recorder, because they did carry those around a lot back then, or it's his writings. We don't have a lot of him on video. Like we have a bunch of like Harold Klemp videos of his like webinars and teachings. In one article, Lane shows me Twitchell is reported to have piercing blue eyes, to sleep only 4 hours a night, to read 5,000 words a minute, to eat little, and to have the ability to be in all places at the same time. Sounds fucking exhausting, but whatever. Imagine being like, I read 5,000 words a minute. I'm pretty sure that that is humanly impossible. You know? I don't know anyone can do that. He's like, I don't need food. I don't need sleep. I do speed reading. And do you see these nice eyes? Yeah. I can also be everywhere at the same time. Eckankar took off like wildfire, growing from 3 students to thousands in less than 3 years. Again, as did all the cults that came out in the late 60s. We remember what was going on in the late 60s and early 70s. There was a lot of the freedom movement. There was a lot of advocacy, actually. That was the time when everyone was like, let's all go and get human rights and blah, 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 blah. So there was a lot going on. A lot of people searching. A lot of rock music. You know, it was a fun time, the late 60s. I was definitely born in the wrong time. I was supposed to be going to Woodstock. But, you know, it was a fun time. So you can kind of see how in, you know, the summer of love time, how they would have been able to grow a cult. It was the same was said about the Manson family, right? And all of these cults have that similar thing about them. A lot of them started at this time during all these movements and during this time in which there was a lot of very young adults that kind of went out into the world and thinking about, like, you know, what's going on in the world. I need to go discover. Time of discovery, if you will. This is live. I am live right now. So you can kind of see how the 60s and 70s did start a lot of cults and religions. Again, I think it was very much due to that all going on. The teachings of Eckankar are presented to the public through books, free brochures, advertised meetings and lectures, and of course, word of mouth. There are also stuff that you can buy, but they don't really go into that a whole lot, right? They're not like, oh, and we also sell you a bunch of stuff, because then that might be a red flag. According to one brochure, which invites me to experience the miracle of spiritual growth and to climb the stairway to spiritual freedom, Eckankar membership is said to be renewable on a yearly basis. Members receive a monthly discourse, which they have the option of studying alone or in classes. Oh, but wait, I thought you didn't have to do anything to be in this. The suggested annual membership donation, in quote, the suggested donation for individuals is $120 in 1995. A bargain in the Miracles and Freedom market. A representative at the Eckankar International office assured me that no one is turned away for lack of funds. Of course not. They're like, that's okay. You can just pay it every once in a while. Right? It's like, well, let's come up with a payment plan for you to be in this cult. Sounds ridiculous, but yes, they would have. They don't care. I mean, it is about money to them. But, I mean, first they got to hook you in order to get your money. Eckankar, which is now called the Religion of Light and Sound, again, 1995. And I kind of told you guys this. This thing started in 1965, and then it's been called so many different things. And this is why I want to go look into the whole light and sound area. I want to go look into Vardakar. I want to go look into all of this, because Eckankar has kind of been several different names and things throughout the last several years. And it teaches that each individual is soul inhabiting a human body. Soul, being a spark of God, is on a journey to find its way home to God, or the Sugmad. Eckankar is the most direct path to becoming a co-worker with God. They say that Eckankar actually means co-worker with God. Initiations link soul to the Ek, which is their Holy Spirit, their God, if you will, which can be seen as light and heard as sound. But the thing is, like, they call their God Ek, Holy Spirit, but then they also call it God. So there isn't like one name for God over here. It isn't like the Catholic religion where you only do the in the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit thing like that, and then that's it. And if you call God something else, you in trouble. If you were to call God Ek over there, they'd be like, "Excuse me, we do not refer to God as that." It's not like that. Here you can call God whatever you want. It's that whole openness thing that they're trying to portray, right? And they say that it can be seen as light and heard as sound, which makes me laugh a little. So I'm like, when you see, you probably see light. When you hear, it's a sound. Very good. Very good job, Paul. Good job. Followers of Eckankar believe that beyond the physical world, there are many other realms existing at higher vibratory rates. Through daily spiritual exercises, even though remember, to be in this cult, there is nothing that you have to do every single day. It's very open. You don't have to acquire it to any certain way of living. During the daily spiritual exercises, one can shift one's awareness from the physical world and soul travel to these higher planes, like the esoteric plane, in order to burn off all their karma in this lifetime and to be released from the cycle of death and reincarnation. Ekkas practice detachment from the vagaries of life. This is not seen as coldness or indifference, right? But as a precursor to unconditional love. Isn't it sweet? The living Eckmaster acts as the organizational head and as a guide to the aspirant's spiritual journey. The inner form of the living Eckmaster, which is known as the Mahanta, who again, right now that's Harold Klemp, works with students in the dream state and during their spiritual exercises. The living Eckmaster descends from an unbroken line of Viraji masters. Any of these 900 plus masters may appear to spiritual seekers on the inner planes or in the physical world, often in disguise, though. So, like, I don't know if you'll be able to tell if they're there. They're in disguise. The beggar you meet on the street may really be an Eckmaster. So make sure that you give them your money, okay? Or else they might smite you. At one Eckankar seminar in Florida, a panhandler happened to station himself outside the hotel where the seminar was held. Ekkas left and right were smiling at the guy, stopping for long chats and tossing money into his cup. Oh my God, could you imagine? I would love to just watch that go down on the other side of the street. Just knowing, I would start going and gathering up other homeless people. I'd be, listen, I found you a way to be okay for the night, no matter what. They're doing an Ekist meeting over here. If you just go sit outside, you will get all of the donations. They'll have conversations with you. Dude, you might even have them come kiss your feet. Like, just come over here. That's how we can save homelessness. Someone go tell Chris Johnson that we figured out the way. Those damn hippies. Well, thank you. Thank you. I'm glad that I at least make you laugh as we go through serious topics. So, that's I love this. The perplexed beggar was in hog heaven. I mean, yeah. Who knows? Maybe he was him. Maybe he was. I just love this. That's how we'll save homelessness. Go tell Chris Johnson we figured out a way. We just got to get all the homeless people from under the bridge to go to the Ekkas meetings. Solved homelessness right there. They'll get all of the donations. Will be good to go. We can even teach them some of the verses from the books. We'll help them out. Then they'd really believe it. Writing this summary of beliefs, I consulted Eckankar materials, but I didn't need to. After giving lectures and teaching Eckankar classes for 10 years, I already knew them well. Yeah, but when you're writing something like this, just want to go make sure, In Eckankar, there is a technique called the golden-tongued wisdom. This is something that's very sus to me. I find it very worrisome that this is a belief system. when I was growing up, I had one of those moms that was like very Catholic and rock music was bad and The Simpsons was a bad show to watch. And this like reminds me of this where it would be like, you can't listen to that music. The devil's speaking to us through the fucking rock music, you know? Although here they like it. So golden tongued wisdom is going to be described to us. And this is something, it's worrisome. It's where you find spiritual guidance through an overheard conversation, a voice on the radio, or lyrics of a popular song. A line will leap out and inspire you. I'm a fool to want you, quivers Billie Holiday through my stereo speakers. Was I a fool to want Eckankar? I don't think so. Well, you kind of were, but anyway. In the early 70s, when I joined, I was dysfunctionally shy, a borderline agoraphobic, afraid to talk to sales ladies in department stores. Besides my straight A's, I had nothing to give me a sense of self-worth. In Eckankar, since everyone is soul, everyone is worthy. As Eckankar filled my life, I felt like I was entering Shangri-La, a new glistening world of love, of possibility opening before me. I gave up drugs, and my grades went down. Those two things were not coincided. You usually give up drugs and your grades go up, okay? But their grades went down. Well, a few people I met were off the wall. Eckas in general make wonderful friends, kind, caring, non-judgmental. Operating as I do now in a professional arts world in which people want a resume before deciding whether to talk to you, I miss the support of the Eckankar community. There's been times where I've been out here in the world and I'm like, you know, I miss the support of this old movement I used to be in. But then I'm like, no, wait, that was a cult. You can't miss that. Slap myself in the face and take myself out of it. You know. And the sex. Though Eckankar in no way encourages sexual contact among its members, with that degree of trust and the sense of two souls meeting, the sex was great. I was 21. My only regrets were that I sold all my rock albums to pay for my membership. Damn it. How are you going to listen to Billie Holiday now? Lane's research into Eckankar is meticulously documented. The making of a spiritual movement is, in fact, so well documented that at times it reads like a 200-page footnote. It lacks the wit, passion, and narrative drive of his other books. Lane, like his counterpart Houdini, seems shackled. Two figures emerge from the stilled style. The protean Paul Twitchell and his young, vivacious wife Gail, who after Twitchell's death married his successor, Darwin Gross, in a dynasty-like power play that troubled and thrilled the faithful. It was like a soap opera over here in Eckankar, you know. Twitchell died, and then Darwin Gross here went over and took his wife. A little strange, but apparently a lot of people in the cult were actually like okay with it. It was sort of split, but you know, a lot of people were like, yeah, no, that's fine. Lane attributes the initial success of Eckankar to Gail's organizational abilities. She's very clean and clear about her business acumen. Everybody I've ever talked to who knows Gail says she's a very sharp person, and Twitchell was also very sharp, but maybe not sharp business-wise. He never had much money. Combine these two forces, the creativity of Paul Twitchell with the organizational skills of Gail. Lane opens his hands in a gesture indicating anything could happen. I don't think Twitchell imagined that Eckankar would blossom the way it did. It went through the roof a lot quicker than he expected. It's the reason I believe that he plagiarized so blatantly. He was just like, oh my God, what the fuck do I do now? Everyone's joining this thing. I got nothing. Because he had to get a lot done. You got it. The way to get more income is to have new material, speculates Lane. Imagine it. You've got a lot of new clientele out there ready to buy your stuff. To come up with original material takes time, and time is money. Dr. Bluth, Twitchell's personal doctor and vice president of Eckankar at the time, has confirmed that he gave Twitchell books from the Radosalami library. Right? So he was like, yeah, I gave him those books. Yeah, he probably copied them. His earlier writings didn't really talk about Rebazar Tars, the 500-year-old bearded Tibetan monk who wears a maroon robe, carries his powerful right hand a huge walking staff, and speaks with a musical voice. A musical voice. He's a character who has seized the imaginations of Ekis as completely as Ahab or Falstaff has seized ours. Instead, Twitchell wrote about Kirpal Singh and Swami Premananda. Now, what do you do when your group is charging money and does not follow any of the restrictions of this Indian group it evolved out of? One whose teachings are free. So I came upon this theory called genealogical dissociation. Simply put, Twitchell cut his connection with Radosalami for good marketing reasons. He had to make it seem like it's his own creation. Because if he linked the two, he'd lose his potential clientele. Because people would be like, well, why do I gotta pay to come over here and learn it for you when I can just go do it for free? Right? It just makes me sad. He's just out here stealing it basically from someone who gives it for free so that he can monetize it and then have his own control and power with it. Because he doesn't want to share that control and power with anyone else, right? I mean, that would be awful. It was to hide these past connections. Lane believes that Twitchell created the unbroken line of Vairagi Ekbasters dating back some 6 million years ago to Gecko, who emigrated from the planet Venus. Understandably, he changed the names of his sources because he didn't want people to know about his past. Remember, he'd been kicked out of the Swami Prananada's church in 1955 because he beat someone up or tried to in the kitchen. His previous associations were tainted. It got to the point that it became a mythology in which Twitchell couldn't remember all the names. On tape, Twitchell is asked about Rebazar Tars. In what century was he born? He totally doesn't know. He doesn't know what the guy is talking about. Reservoir Tars. Yeah, that Reservoir Tars. Understand, he's got names coming out of the woodwork. And then the interviewer asks, so who do you think this guy actually really is? Okay. Probably a composite cover name for 3 people. So this is a make-believe teacher and master that he had. So now we're not even actually sure if Paul Twitchell has ever had his own master. Remember earlier in this, I said, oh, look, it says here he had a master and he went and learned some teachings from this guy. Yeah, well, guess what? That may be a make-believe person. King David says, I am laughing and crying at the same time. I went to these seminars and believed this nonsense. My stepfather was so excited about it, and I followed him. And see, that makes a lot of sense. Because when a parent, right? Our parents are always somebody, if you have like a decent relationship with your family, it's someone we should be looking up to, guiding us. I'm a parent, right? It's your job to guide your children and go and do what's right. So it makes sense that when a parent believes in something so heavily and goes to follow it, that their child would then maybe do the same thing. Especially if you see like your stepfather who's very excited about it. I mean, you see someone you look up to, they're very excited about something that they've just become a part of course you're going to go and join. And I think everyone in a way, shape, or form is desperate for answers. I don't know if it's necessarily desperate for a leader per se, because you do want to have your own independence. Even at a lot of times when people are in this, I feel like they join it to have a little bit of their own independence, but you want to know the answer. It's okay to live a life where you're searching for the answers of life purpose and what is going on with our world. And I don't know how people live that don't do that. That would be boring. So I feel like for most people, maybe it's not about a leader. You don't necessarily want someone to be like telling you what to do and being like a leader, but you almost want someone to validate as you go along. Does that make sense? Like someone who can kind of be like, yes, you are on the right track. Yes, a guide, if you will. I don't like using the word leader, but I like the word guide better. Someone who can maybe provide answers. I feel like a lot of these cults, they promise to provide all these answers that people are searching for. And that's why, you end up there and wanting to believe. So, David Lane says that Rabazar is probably a composite cover name for 3 people. Guru Nanak, who is the founder of Sikhism, which was started 500 years ago. Sawan Singh, who was Kirpal Singh's guru, and Swami Premananda. Whereas Sudhir Singh, another memorable character in Twitchell's cosmology, is Kirpal Singh. In The Making of a Spiritual Movement, Lane quotes many passages from Twitchell's magazine articles written in the 60s, in which Twitchell cites Swami Premananda, Kirpal Singh, Meher Baba, Guru Nanak, Kabir, and even Jesus. Lane then quotes these same passages as they were later reproduced, usually word for word in Eckankar books, with the names changed to the Eckmasters, Sudhir Singh, Phubi Quants, Rebazar Tars, Lai Tsi, J, and Gopal Das. We are starting to think that this whole thing is just made up with made up people now, aren't we? Lane and his friends playfully call one another by the names of Eckmasters. Lane places his hands to his face like a phone receiver. Hi, Phubi, this is Gecko. I choked down the last gulp of my green garden vegetable cocktail and asked, where do you think Twitchell got these names? Lane says he got them from his Indian books on Radhaswami or Julian Johnson's The Path of the Masters, or from With a Great Master in India. He came up with the name Sudhir Singh from the name Sudarshan Singh. He just cut off the Shan part out of it and put Sudhir. Usually he mixes Indian names with Chinese names from popular Tibetan or Taoist books, and he'll conflate the two. An example is Jago Ho. Now, Jagat is actually the first name of a Radhaswami guru named Jagat Singh. Then he took the Ho and he put the 2 words together. He does that all the time. Once when I was driving down to Baja on one of my frequent surf trips, he continues, I noticed to my amazement a highway sign that said, Rabazar. I don't know exactly what it means, no passing or something like that. I said to myself, I bet this is where Twitchell got the name Rebizar Tars. Remember, when Twitchell founded Eckankar in 1965, he was living in San Diego at Point Loma. So, would not put it past Twitchell to have simply coined the name from one of his trips to Beta. Why not? I would love it if he just got it from Street Sign. That would make my whole day. For tax purposes, Twitchell moved Eckankar to Las Vegas, but he maintained a residence in San Diego for the rest of his life. When he died in 1971, he was living in Del Mar. Lane asked me if I wanted to see Twitchell's Del Mar home. Sure, but when we go to the Hillcrest Village parking garage to retrieve Lane's car, he can't find it. As we wander aimlessly back and forth between the second and third levels of the garage, I smile at my surfer companion's inability to negotiate this concrete urban maze. Clearly, he is more comfortable with the fluid topography of waves, meditation of philosophical inquiry. Finally, as a last resort, Lane suggests we exit the parking garage and then walk down the ramp where we drove in. Lane imagines himself driving. Let me see. I turned left here, now right, then I drove straight for a bit. Using his gyroscopian homing pigeon technique, he leads me straight to his little white Nissan. How humble. Once we get to Del Mar, Lane pulls to the side of the road and examines a copy of Twitchell's death certificate to get the exact address. Here it is, Pine Avenue, right next to where I was living when I was doing my books in the 80s. If I had a really good arm, I could have thrown a baseball up to the hill without gravity and maybe hit the house. Did you know this before you moved there? No, I had no idea. We drive over and park a few blocks from the beach in front of a posh 2-story wooden house with a cobblestone drive surrounded by Torrey pines. Lane leans down to better peer through his window. I don't remember it looking this way, he says pensively. I don't remember it being this nice. I don't remember that second story. It's a bitchin' house. I ask Lane to tell me about Twitchell's mysterious death. Many Ekkas regard this death with the same mixture of awe and curiosity with which we regard the death of JFK. And remember, I was Marilyn Monroe in a past life. I just wanted to remind you. I figured Lane knows plenty about this, but he refuses to reveal details for publication and will only repeat the facts as listed on the death certificate. Twitchell died of a heart attack around 1 o'clock in the morning on September 17th of 1971 in Cincinnati, Ohio. The story he tells me off the record, however, is filled with enough ardor and drama to qualify as an alternate ending to Citizen Kane. But Dave, I whine, why won't you talk about it on tape? Because I have a certain kind of respect for him, a kind of sweet affection. There's certain things I left out of the book, and one of them is the night Twitchell died. There's a lot of stuff I know about Eckankar, lots of stuff that is real juicy and real scandalous. But I wanted to limit my book to some major salient features about plagiarism and cover-up. What I found was so obvious that anybody could have discovered it. It wasn't just David Lane's personal opinion. I have nice feelings towards Eckankar. I don't have a real axe to grind. At a Hillcrest cafe, Lane confides, the people who scare me are John Rogers' people, not Eckankar's. John Roger Hinkins, founder of the Church of the Movement of Spiritual Inner Awareness, MSA, pronounced Messiah, has gotten a lot of bad press lately. Last year, former cult member Peter McWilliams published a scathing tell-all, Life 102, What to Do When Your Guru Sues You. November's Vanity Fair linked Ariana Huffington's allegiance to Messiah to her husband's unsuccessful Senate campaign, and the March issue of Playboy ran a detailed expose. Look, back when Playboy, it was about the articles. JFK entered my body when I was around 6 months old. That's awesome. So, I really now want to go and find the Life 102 what to do when your guru sues you. I really do. I'm like, gee, I want to read that one. But Lane had the jump on all of them when back in 1984 he wrote The J.R. Controversy, a critical analysis of John Roger Hinkins and Messiah. Lane pays for my coffee and his Coke, and we sit down at a small dark table. The walls are covered with Andrea Zuli's dramatic lit oil painting of monstrous, chalky, fleshed zombies. I imagine them as the tormented souls of all the cultists who have lost their faith because of Lane. John Roger was a follower of Eckankar. Remember I told you all these cults are all connected? They all literally, you could go all the way back in time to the very first one, and you could literally connect every single cult together. Dangerous one too, all together. From one to another to another to another. They all have predecessors that have been in the other ones. It's ridiculous. But it's true. So John Roger was a follower of Eckankar. In 68, he was a convener, which means he held Eck classes in his home in Rosemead, California. After a year or so, he branched off and started his own group, Messiah, claiming that in 1963, he had a kidney stone operation and that after 9 days of being in a coma, he had been commissioned to be the mystical traveler consciousness. At first, Hinkins thought it was the legendary Rebazartars who came to him on the inner planes and passed on the keys to the kingdom. But later, after seeing a photo of Randasomi Guru Sawan Singh, Hinkins decided that it was really Sawan Singh who had given him the mantle. Browsing in a bookstore one day, Lane stumbled upon one of John Rogers' books and noticed it was very similar to Eckankar. You can imagine how I felt, exclaims Lane. This was in 76 or 77, and I was 20 years old, so it's like All the President's Men. I wrote to him, and he wrote a real nice letter back, saying that we should get together and talk. This guy's pretty smart, because he knows that if he pays attention to me, that's a good way of buying me off, so he can spin doctor my research. He invited me to his house in Mandeville Canyon, a beautiful house, a mansion. I was very naive. The minute he saw me, he canceled all of his appointments and spent 6 hours with me. And that would have made Lane feel very, very special. Good thing Lane didn't have to pay for the Coke. That shit was expensive, even back then. Lane leans across the table towards me and grins. I never thought he was gay until everybody said, Helio, looks like he likes you a little too much, Dave. One of his major disciples, Victor Toso, later revealed that he had kind of a quasi-crush on me. Did John Roger ever make any moves on you? No. Okay, Dave. I was flattered that here was a spiritual master who was spending hours with me instead of dissing me or suing me. He wanted to know every dirty piece of laundry on Twitchell and Eckankar. He was obsessed. He used to send me Christmas cards. He gave me his personal phone number, and he offered me $5,000 to help with my research on Eckankar. Did you take any money? Lane shakes his head. No, I kind of thought he was a fraud, but at the time he was being nice to me, so I wasn't in the mood to expose him. Well, the upshot of it is, we were friendly for 5 years, and then in 1983, 4 of his closest disciples defected. They knew what I had done with Eckankar, and they thought, well, he can do this with JR. So there was a secret meeting in a Santa Monica condominium with the defectors. Very top secret, for they were really scared of upsetting John Roger. I taped them for 5 hours. The accusation leveled against Hinkins included embezzling money, plagiarizing from the teachings of Paul Twitchell and others, who of course then Paul Twitchell plagiarized everything, right? Skirting zoning laws, illegally obtaining airfare discounts, setting up tape recorders throughout his house to obtain information that he would later use to appear psychic and sexual misconduct. Lane pauses and thinks for a bit. This is where I've got to be careful. Everybody's sexuality is different than everybody else's. I imagine we have a wide spectrum. The problem is that John Roger claims to be celibate. His disciples told me he would pick a guy every night out of the staff and claim that they needed to have sex with him in order to increase their aura. Or they needed, pardon my language, a rectal interface in order to burn off karma. An interface? Yeah. He has this thing called aura interphasing, where you do aura balancing, soul balancing, etheric balancing. The disciples felt used and manipulated for spiritual reasons. After the secret meeting, Lane phoned Higgins to ask him about these charges. He went nuts. The courtship was over. Man, it was a nasty conversation. I told him I didn't plan to write about him, but letters started going around the country saying that I was a gay FBI agent in San Diego, that I had researchers working for me that I wasn't paying. Some letters contained threats against me and my informants. In one, he refers to me as Lane the Widower. So then I wrote the JR Controversy for a new journal called Understanding Cults. When it came out, I got a 25-page letter from a group called the Coalition for Civil and Spiritual Freedom. It never existed. It was a P.O. box with John Rogers' own name signed to it. You didn't do a good job of hiding that there, JR. 4 or 5 months later, on October 5th in 1984, Lane's apartment in Del Mar was burglarized. Lane was convinced John Roger was involved. I was teaching at UC San Diego at the time. I came home around 12:30 in the afternoon and the place was ransacked. I mean, I couldn't get in the door, so I had to climb through the bedroom window. The bed was overturned, drawers were everywhere, the phone wire had been disconnected, and there was a big note on a box that said no more. No jewelry was gone, only research stuff, including materials for my doctoral dissertation. Nothing else. He took my wife's personal diaries, a camera, which he must thought had film in it, videotapes, an address book, and my recipe file containing my favorite recipe for Del Mar lentil loaf. He probably thought my recipe file was written in code and had secret information or something like that. I called John Roger immediately. I got one of his disciples. I said, "Where was John Roger yesterday?" The guy turned totally paranoid. His voice changed. "Well, we can't reveal that information." "Was he in San Diego?" No reply. The next day on Channel 8 News came out and did their lead story, Cult Researcher Robbed. They took a copy of my article, The JR Controversy, but they didn't name John Roger. About 4 weeks later, Lane's guru in India, Sharan Singh, received a letter, supposedly from another follower in San Diego, criticizing Lane and quoting from his wife's stolen diaries. Sharan Singh forwarded it to Lane. That same week, Higgins wrote to Lane, assuring him that he wanted to be friends again, and that he had nothing to do with that robbery. Higgins also wrote to Sharan Singh, asking him to use his influence to get Lane to stop doing research on him. According to Lane, all 3 letters are printed in the same typeface, with the same malfunctioning capital A. Then, Lane says excitedly, John Roger committed the biggest mistake. He took my wife's diaries and made handwritten notes in the margins. Should I send this to the IRS? Should I send this to Eckankar? Little notes he was making to himself. Then he mailed some of the stolen documents anonymously to Eckankar under the assumption that they would use it against me, and I would think Eckankar robbed my house. But Eckankar's attorneys mailed the package back to me. It had been mailed originally from a P.O. box that John Roger had personally paid for. The guy's like an idiot, right? And so I had handwriting analysis done on the writing, on the diaries, and on that no more sign. 2 different analysts verified that they were all written by John Roger Higgins. Moreover, people within John Roger's group have confirmed that on the day of the robbery, he was in San Diego. Lane didn't sue Higgins, but he did go public with his story. In Understanding Cults, he published the criminal activities of John Roger Higgins, a laborious account of Higgins's alleged break-in and smear campaign. He also gave full accounts to the San Diego Sheriff's Department and to numerous new agencies. On the Marie Vega TV show in Los Angeles, I said, John Roger Hinkins robbed my house. He threatened to sue the TV station for $1 million if they ever ran the program again. But they keep running it, and he never sued them. I would just run it more too. We're running it every night now. Remember a news report about it in the 80s? Right? In August of 1988, the Los Angeles Times published an extensive two-part critique of John Rogers' activities based on Lane's research. Lane also appeared on Geraldo Rivera's Now It Can Be Told. Geraldo was in New York, and I was on satellite hookup at Universal Studios in the San Fernando Valley. The Cadillac of cults. Are your tax dollars being spent by this group? So they interviewed me, and I had this rainbow tie on, and Geraldo and I were going at each other. I said, yeah, Geraldo, this guy robbed my house. He did this, and he did that. All on national TV. I just went off on him. At this stage, Peter McWilliams, the guy who later wrote Life 102, was still pro John Roger, so he was putting his hands on the camera. That kind of scene. When they tried to interview John Roger. So you get this juxtaposition. Lane really going off on John Roger and McWilliams trying to protect JR's reputation. After such an exhausting chronicle, I feebly inquire, are you still doing research on John Roger? Lane takes a deep breath. No. Several hundred members of Eckankar live in San Diego area, but not all of them participate in local events. Although no meetings are required, the local Eckankar newsletter lists a variety of classes, book discussions, cue chants, and lectures. Many events are open to the public, including the Sunday worship services, which tackle spiritual topics of broad interest. Last April, the current living Eckmaster, Harold Klemp, spoke at a 3-day major seminar at the San Diego Marriott Hotel and Marina. Each year, Eckankar holds 3 of these U.S. seminars, which can draw 6,000 plus people. And yes, you usually have to pay for tickets. 3 local Eckists agreed to speak with me. Late one afternoon, I visited transpersonal psychologist Charles Richards at his office in Del Mar. I'm greeted by a tall, handsome black man with a mustache and short, cropped hair, graying slightly at the temples. He looks professional, but not stuffy in his blue suit jacket, gray shirt, black boots. As we shake hands, I notice he's wearing a gold ring with an embossed EK logo. Around his neck hangs a similar pendant. When I sit down on the cream-colored daybed, he suggests I might be more comfortable in the armchair facing him. On the wall to my right is a framed print of the yin-yang symbol with a feather fixed to it. In 1978, Richard moved from North Carolina to San Diego to pursue his graduate training in psychology. Besides working as a therapist, Richards is taught at the University of Humanistic Studies and is an adjunct staff member of the Center for Creative Leadership in Loyola, an organization that specializes in executive management training. He also does private executive coaching. He is a reserved man whose dimpled smile betrays a sense of humor. On the desk behind him sits a teddy bear. When I asked him what Eckankar's position is on Lane's research, Richards, who's been in Eckankar for 20 years, says he doesn't know. Basically, I feel that David Lane is making a name for himself by being an antagonist to Eckankar. Everybody has a right to pursue whatever interests they have. He focuses a lot on past things, Paul Twitchell, and how much his writings look like the writings of a teaching Lane happened to be in. That's his axe to grind with Eckankar. You can get in debate over whether one paragraph in one of Paul Twitchell's writings looks like a paragraph in somebody else's writings, but that has nothing to do with your spiritual experiences and the confirmation you get personally through the teachings and your work with the inner master. To me, if people want to get into those kinds of discussions, fine, and I'll kick it around with them for a while too, if they want to talk on that level. But the stuff that Lane goes after has nothing to do, for me, with the validity of the teachings. It's funny to me that he says that, because again, to me, if everything is stolen, and that's what you're basing like this whole religion and all the teachings on, is there any validity to it? Like, Again, I guess that's something that is just personal. You'll have to ask yourself. When I was in Eckankar, one of the things that I really liked about it was its respect for other faiths and that there was no pressure to get anybody to join. And this is what the interviewer says. Richard responds, Sri Harold Klemp has taken a special effort to make it clear that we accept the value and the need for all different paths and religions because people operate at different states of consciousness. It's really just so that they can prey on the most people possible, let's be real. But sure, you say it's for that. Eckankar is not for everybody. The Temple of Ek in Chanhassen, Minnesota, is open to people of all faiths to come, to attend the worship services, maybe just to enhance their own beliefs. It's even available for community events. Eckankar is still very much open to and supportive of whatever religion a person belongs to. In fact, we find more in common with people of other religious or spiritual beliefs than we have with people who don't have any religious or spiritual beliefs, simply because they have a commitment to spirit on some level. I'm curious about how Eckankar has changed since I left it in the early 80s. Well, Richard says slowly and thoughtfully in a charming southern accent. Oh, sorry. I did not do any of this in a southern accent, and I refuse to today. I think the present living Eckmaster has not changed the essence of the teachings, which is basically about self-realization and God-realization in the most direct way the individual can achieve that. Rather, he's tried to make the teachings more accessible to the average person who's interested in religion or spirituality, but may not be familiar with a lot of the terms that we've used in the past. Well, what alternative terms have been developed? So this will be interesting, right? Instead of talking about contemplations or the Nurat or the Surat technique for the light and sound, we just say we do spiritual exercises. They're very much like physical exercises, but they're for soul, to strengthen soul's connection with spirit. The spiritual exercises are a form of prayer. We have a different focus and intent, that's all. We talk about the hue as a prayer song or a love song to God, instead of saying it's a chant or mantra. Okay, but you are admitting that it is actually a chant and mantra, right? In the past, we thought that this was our little private esoteric religion. So Harold said, hey, why should we make this difficult for people? Let's try to make it easy for them to at least understand what we're doing, what we're about, and what the potential of the teaching is. A lot of people would see Eckankar as a cult. How would you address that issue? My favorite question. Yes, Mr. Richards, how would you address that issue? I see it as a cult, so how would you address me? Richard takes a long, reticent pause before he answers. People typically define cults, first of all, as based around worshiping a personality. We don't do that in Eckankar, but you do. You do. Right now, it's Harold Klemp. I'm just saying. Secondly, we don't have any kind of communal living. Doesn't matter. That's not what a cult is. Very nice, though. Eckankars are all over the world and in different walks of life and from different political orientations, different socioeconomic levels. See, now, I love it when people are like, this isn't a cult because they don't have a whole communal living area. MLMs are cool because everyone's in their own house. I'm like, that doesn't matter. Still a cult, damn it. There's always been a complete reliance on the individual's own inner guides and not some pre-established protocol that everybody has to operate under. Since its early days, Eckankar has always really been a religion. It's had to be recognized as such in this country to operate as a non-profit organization. When you look at what we do relative to other religions, it basically is no different. We just have a different doctrine and somewhat different beliefs. Thanks, Richards. Richards flashes me his dimples. We figure if it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, we might as well call it a duck. Well, if it looks like a cult, walks like a cult, I'm going to call it a cult. When I leave Richard's office, it's dusk. As I stroll towards the ocean through a lush affluent neighborhood, disappointment creeps over me like the tide. I was never able to penetrate Richard's reassuring politeness until I turned the conversation from Eckankar to Freud, Adler, and Long. Then his whole manner changed. He leaned forward in his chair, his voice empathetically rose and fell. But even his formality, I instinctively trusted him. Del Mar's beach is amazingly clean. People sit on park benches, push baby carriages along paths, jog beside the water. The air is cool as I listen to the soft lapping of waves. I don't know how to read today. The vivid orange-pink horizon stretches on endless beneath a nearly full moon. I feel like I've stumbled into a new age greeting card or a novel by Iris Murdoch. Try to imagine experiencing this extravagance on a regular basis. Murdoch's obsession with water suddenly makes sense. In the sea, she writes, far away in that ocean of gold, stars were silently shooting and falling and finding their fates among those billions and billions of merging golden lights. A curtain after curtain of gauze was quietly removed. And I saw stars behind stars behind stars, as in the magical Odeons of my youth. And I saw into the vast soft interior of the universe, which was slowly and gently turning itself inside out. I went to sleep, and in my sleep, I seemed to hear a song of singing. Friday afternoon, I visit 22-year veteran of Eckankar, Kevin McMahon, in his Cardiff home. I'm surprised to meet a casually dressed middle-aged man with graying hair, who seemed much younger on the phone. McMahon looks as Irish as his name, with a large soft face and a sad mouth that bends pleasantly when he smiles. As he fetches me a glass of juice, I sit in his cozy living room, which is decorated with family photos, relics from Thailand, and McMahon's own paintings, imaginary landscapes with lots of vivid blue. McMahon, who is raised Catholic in New York City and on Long Island, has always been interested in spirituality. In the army, he traveled to Thailand, where he met his wife. She was a Buddhist, and I became interested in Buddhism. Just a natural progression. When I came back to the States, I read a book by Paul Twitchell called The Tiger's Fang. I had heard about this ability to get out of the body, where one can have an internal spiritual experience. The experiential aspect to Eckankar really interested me, and that's how it started. McMahon seemed suspicious of me, so I tell him that my current husband is an Irish Catholic from Long Island, and that I'm still very much in contact with my former husband, who's a higher initiate of Eckankar like himself. But he's unimpressed on both counts. Cautiously, I bring up David Lane. He has a personal thing against Eckankar, he briskly replies. I can understand why he would be doing this, because the Eckas have never gone out of their way to hurt him. But he claims that they did, I think, in one regard. I know that here in San Diego, when we had our X Center, elderly members of Eckankar who were sitting at the center got threatening telephone calls from Christian organizations. Do you think this was because of Lane? No, it had nothing to do with him. I'm just saying that if he had a personal problem with some Eckas, this is not an indictment against Eckankar. This is an indictment against the individuals he's had contact with. I met David Lane in San Diego. He was giving a talk at UCSD, trying to sell his book, preaching against Eckankar and a whole bunch of other religions. I stood up and said, I'm a member of the community. I'm a coach in the little league I'm involved with and schools. I gave a list of my involvements with the community, and then I said, I'm an Ekis, and I believe in God. Why is one faith trying to knock somebody traveling the same path to God? It doesn't make sense. And all the people kind of looked at me as if to say, well, geez, he doesn't look evil. Lane came up and he talked to me and thanked me for coming. David Lane has his own personal agenda. We see that all the time. Though McMahon is obviously angry about Lane, he maintains a kind manner. I get a sense of his gentleness does not come naturally, that has been worked at with great success. What about Lane's plagiarism charges? I ask. What I find interesting is that his material doesn't shake the belief of most Ekis. This is why he responds immediately. We don't rely on the written word. I had out-of-body experiences. I had contact with spirit. I saw the blue light. Hence all the blue in his paintings, right? They're all about the blue. Saw all the things they talk about in the books prior to coming to Eckankar. A lot of people have. I met a guy from Vietnam whose whole family traveled here to San Diego by boat, guided by Rebazar Tars. One that doesn't exist. Who's one of the Ekmasters that's written about in the books, and he didn't know anything about Eckankar. How did he know it was Rebazar Tars? Which we all would like to know, because we just found out that person doesn't exist, right? The guide was a bearded man in his maroon robe. When the Vietnamese fellow was in San Diego, he saw a poster for an Eckankar event that had a picture of Rebazar Tars on it, and he recognized him. We've had people have recognized Harold Klemp prior to his becoming the living Ekmaster. He kept coming to them in their dreams. Plagiarism charges fall on deaf ears with Ekis because we've had experiences outside of book learning. If we were to rely on books as the source of our knowledge and our truth, we'd be really hurting because we'd be all going in different directions. They'd be nothing to believe. I'm not interested in all this other dialogue that David Lane is so focused on. People's experiences don't matter to David Lane. If that's his focus in life, then he has a very limited view of life. McMahon explains that plagiarism isn't always what it seems. Understanding that if you read the sacred works of all the religions, such as the Bhagavad Gita, the Bible, or the Quran, you're going to see references almost exactly alike. He tells me a phenomenal story about an American writer and a European writer who, unbeknownst to one another, wrote identical books and sent them to the same publisher. Which, of course, do we know about this? Is this a real thing? Probably not. You can explain it in a lot of different ways. Paul was an avid reader. He read thousands and thousands of books, and he was a spiritual, hungry man. His quest for knowledge and experience of God is without question. This is not the type of individual who was looking for riches. He didn't dress well. He didn't have a lot of possessions or anything. His only interest was getting the message out about the light and sound of God. McMahon doesn't blame anyone for being skeptical. I think that in Eckankar, skepticism is healthy, he continues. One of the disciplines that we employ is the law of discrimination. We actually challenge our inner experiences in the name of God to make sure that they're not phony, not of the negative world of Cal. We have to make sure for ourselves that what we're experiencing is truth and not an illusion. McMahon generously drives me to my interview with holistic health practitioner Bettina Yellman, whose Del Mar office is just down the hall from Richards's. Yellman is stunning, a tall and extremely thin, clad in pale beige pantsuit. Her natural blonde hair pulled it back into a bun. The bangs teased like feathers across her forehead. Her enormous eyes seem to sparkle. Yellman tells me she was born in Germany. I got sick a lot when I was a baby. I think it was a resistance to being in the physical world and being fully embodied, and so I tried to exit a few times. There is indeed something ethereal about this frail woman. When Yellman was 6, her family moved to Texas. It was difficult coming to this country, trying to figure out the language, the new culture, and what to do. I had my 2 sisters to take care of while my parents were being mixed up. There was a lot going on. She speaks so softly, I move the microphone closer. In Texas, she says, disembodied being began visiting her. I called him my friend, she continues. For years, he came to me every single day and would teach me, but I never visually saw him except for once. So you were awake when you had this experience? I asked, intrigued. Totally aware, she says, seriously. Hi, Six Drops, good to see you. Master Path with Sri Gary Olson is an offshoot of it is. Yes, it is. It was like in my imagination, I would just close my eyes and he would be there, and I would be there with him too. One time he said, "I want to take you someplace." I said, "Okay." It was exciting, someplace to go. I remember he took my hand and I could feel it, a concrete thing. We were suddenly in a marketplace with lots of bright burgundy-colored carpets. People were wearing rich, colorful clothing. There was music and noise and clamor, and I turned to look at my friend. He had on a white turban with a gemstone right here in the middle. Yelman points to her bangs. He was kind of a dark complexion. Once I got into Eckankar, I was suspicious that he probably was an Eckmaster, but he never really said so. When Yelman was 12 and she moved with her family to California, the visitation ceased. In a way, it was like an abandonment. I didn't know why it happened. Actually, in the moment, it was okay. I hardly noticed it. I became a teenager, and all this other stuff was grabbing my attention. I keep looking around at Yelman's office. Everything is mauve and cream. The water cooler, the paper cups, the walls, carpet, chairs, and even the stereo. Yelman's studies at UCSD brought her to San Diego in 1974. 9 years later, she read Paul Twitchell's Eckankar, Key to Secret Worlds. My parents raised me not to write in books, and so I didn't. But he was describing my experiences in his book, and on every single page, I just had to make my own notes. As Yelman laughs, her stiff, angular body quivers with excitement. After reading Eckankar books for a year and a half, Yelman went to a seminar in Las Vegas. "I'm an extremely intuitive person," she says. "So I feel things long before I understand them in my head. As I walked through the hotel lobby, I couldn't see to the other side of the room. There was so much smoke, and I'm very sensitive to smoke. Yet I felt totally spiritualized." Though wary of groups, Yelman decided to give Eckankar a try. When I called to sign up, they told me that I never had to go to a class if I didn't want to, because that was my condition. If I could just study in the closet, then I would join. Aside from the fact that Eckankar has techniques and tools that are incredible and not really matched by other groups, I think the freedom that is allowed to the members is a wonderful thing. See, so that's why I keep saying like that. That's what tends to get people in this thing. The so-called freedom, even though, like I said, every single day you're supposed to be doing spiritual exercises and singing there's a lot of freedom. During the first 6 months of membership, new Ekis usually receive what is known as their first initiation in the dream state. There are horror stories of this first initiation that we are going to be getting into in future. Yelman received hers while at an X seminar in Hawaii. That was a picture of the girl from earlier, remember? After dinner, she confides, "I walked along the beach and sat down beneath a tree to do a contemplation. The most incredible feeling came over me, literally like light inside of me. The sound current was very loud. Spirit can express itself as sound or as bright or even colored lights. The ocean was rushing. Usually I hear a sound that is like electricity, kind of high-pitched, but rich, fuller than just electrical buzzing." Just want to let everyone know that even an empty room has a sound. If you work in audio and voice recording, you're very aware of that. So again, an empty room could have nothing in it. No matter what, the room has a sound. So sometimes I wonder if they're just like hearing that kind of thing, you know? Some people who have a ringing in their ears say that it's horrible, but this is not oppressive at all. This feels like the atoms in the universe moving around. It's like a rushing sound in the background. Anyway, there was an intensification of that, and I knew undoubtedly something was going on. That night in the dream state, I had a meeting with a master. At the time, I didn't know who he was. When I woke up in the morning, I had an opportunity to ask questions. Incredibly, I was awake, but still in my inner world at the same time. I would ask a question and get an answer, and I would jot it down. I still have those notes. Those answers were so far-reaching in their depth and breadth. They still help me today, 9 years later. I asked what happened to my friend, my childhood master, and they said, he taught you everything he could teach you, and you agreed that it was complete. It was so satisfying. It was so true, really true, true to the core of my being. So who was your childhood teacher? So was your childhood teacher an Eckmaster? Yeoman flickers in her pink and cream chair like a pale flame. He is Shamus Tabriz, a living Eckmaster of 400 years ago who now teaches on the casual plane at the Sakapori Temple of Golden Wisdom in the city of Hanu. Just, in case you want to know where he's at today. That's where he is. He's on the casual plane. You can go meet him there. He'll teach you stuff. Yeah. He was an Eckmaster of 400 years ago, so dude's dead. All right. Not here. But his soul has left his body and is just chilling at the casual plane. Like, just chilling there. Hope he got a lot of snacks. And which Eckmaster initiated you? Rebazar Tars! Oh my God, it's this man again that's been made up. She says reverently. In another lifetime, I may have had a connection with him, and so that would be a good way of linking me back in. Same with Seamus ad Tabriz. I'm also aware that in at least 2 previous lifetimes, I was killed because of my beliefs. Specifically in reference to Ekankar. And so I think some of that karma was still sitting heavily on my chest, so to speak. So this woman is basically told, hey, listen, I know you. You've had all these different lifetimes, and in 2 of them, you were actually killed for sticking up for this religion. Isn't it great that you can be here in this lifetime and you can just practice it so openly and freely? And she believes this. Like, listen, all of you out there, in your past lifetime, you were all major supporters and subscribers of Queen of Spade. So be sure to hit that subscribe button in this lifetime. Otherwise, awful karma will come to you. Awful. Just say it. See if that works. I'm impressed with Yeoman's absolute assurance. The living Eggmaster gives support and guidance for the things that we choose to do. Yeoman pauses for emphasis. If you are going to visit a new city, wouldn't you want a guide? Wouldn't you want to stay away from the places where the prostitutes are, from the dark streets and the hoodlums? When you're traveling, you want to have fun. You want to see pretty things. You need a guide who knows the city. The living Eckmaster helps the souls that are embodied here on Earth to gain the spiritual insights that they need to grow and evolve spiritually. Yeoman hugs me goodbye, and I take an endless rush hour cab ride to Hillcrest, during which the driver asks me endless questions about Ekankar. He's a friendly guy with lots of dreams of his own, but I just want to stare at the streams of headlights along the way. When I get home, my host greets me with a Manhattan. I need it. One exclaims, aren't you afraid of those Ekankarists? Aren't you afraid of what they're going to do? I take a gulpy sip of my drink. No, I sigh. I'm not afraid of those people. On Saturday, I lunch with Lane at a restaurant in Del Mar. I hook my mic over the breadbasket and turn on the tape recorder. He tells me he's currently working on a second book about Ekankar entitled Gecko Came from Venus, Exploring the Hidden World of Ekankar on an Unauthorized Expedition. But Dave, I ask in exasperation, after all this time, why are you persisting? Rarely in life do you ever get to play detective. He said, what do you mean? Nuts? I get to play detective all day long, every day. It's great fun. I'm like fucking Nancy Drew out here. That's really what it is for me. I wanted Ekankar in some weird universe to keep going because it's fun for me. And I don't mean fun in a mean way. I mean, I find Paul to be incredibly imaginative and very interesting to investigate. It may be a game for Lane, but believers are playing for high emotional and intellectual stakes. Dropping out of a religion, one in which one attempts to focus one's every thought, every action on those teachings, is a horrible experience. Though Ekankar does not try to coerce disillusioned members to remain on the path, Ekkas are warned that when they drop out, their spiritual growth stops. And they are at the mercy of the cow, the negative force of the universe. They're Satan, if you will. The cow is similar to Satan, representing everything that is materialistic and evil, a being of vileness, wrath, and vengeance. It's just like how Catholics we're told when I was growing up, everything was going to make me go to hell. For years after I left Eckankar, I was plagued with wrenching spasms of primal fear, emptiness, collapse, and betrayal. David Lane's critiques of Eckankar may be well documented and rational, but religious devotion is not about rationality. On an internet alternative religion bulletin board, a former Ekis writes that after reading Lane's book, I felt as if someone had just torn out my insides and served them to me over rice. Losing one's cult is like losing the love of one's life. The lover has lied to you, but the lover is oh so seductive and satisfying, and submission is so thrilling. It's difficult not to resent Lane, that temptress, that town gossip, that snake in Eden. But Ekis are such sweet people, I insist. Don't you feel like the great white hunter attacking the endangered rhinoceros? No! And this is what I get all the time too. Like, Queen of Spades out here attacking people by talking about cults and scams. No. No. That's not what it is. Lane responds with animation. People always say, leave us alone. Eckankar works. I do leave those people alone. I don't go into X centers and walk around and say, here, read my book. All I'm saying is that Twitchell was lying to his constituency. If you want to go and follow a group in which the founder lies to you, whether it's about the spiritual masters on the inner planes, about his personal life, or about the sources of his information in his books, well, fine. Do people get mad at Ralph Nader for saying that a pinto blows up? Wouldn't you want to know everything you possibly could about the history of this group and then make your choice? It seems to me I'm doing a huge favor to the Ekis because now they can know that if they're joining, what they're joining, and if they've read my book, they've done all the research. And if they still think this is for me, then fine. They've made an open-eyed decision, an educated one at least. There's contradictions and scandals in every religion, Christianity included. Why do you make a point of fingering Eckankar? I do think Christianity has fucked up more people in its history than Eckankar ever has. You're right. Every world religion has got its problems. I think it would be wrong of me to say that Eckankar is unique. Let's just say that on a relative scale, Jim Jones in Jonestown is the worst, and that Mother Teresa of Calcutta is the best. In that range, Eckankar is kind of in the middle, and I don't think it should rank with the most dangerous of cults. It has its positive aspects, a sense of community, a sense of focusing on the individual and his or her experiences in the divine. On the negative side, Twitchell's teachings were synthesized without really maturely thinking whether these different teachings fit in together. I think there's some sophomoric techniques that it's naive in terms of its psychology. Instead of asking people to be really skeptical of things, it's asking them to believe almost anything. But Dave, I counter, when you talk to exes, they always tell you, I'm totally a skeptical person. I don't believe anything until it's proven to me. I'm sure they said that about Jim Jones. I'm sure they said that in David Korsh's group, Mother Teresa's group. They would say that in any college or institution. You're not going to say, well, I'm a dumb shit. My group is for dumb shits. Everybody has an IQ of 80 or lower. Oh, let's go. Let's start a religion. Our pizza arrives, and Lane politely allows me to take the first piece. I ask, how do you account for Eckankar's success? Eckankar uses two things that everybody has to have. That is People have to find meaning in their lives regardless. Second, everybody has to dream at night, or most people dream at night. And Ekis dream about Phoebe Cairns or Reza Bartars or Paul Twitchell. I dream about all these guys myself because if you study the stuff long enough, I see egg masters, I see Ratasami masters, I have L. Ron Hubbard coming to me in my damn dreams. But it's my vivid imagination, the projections of my own mind, my own day-to-day experiences, as dreams are, right? That's all dreams are. I wake up feeling like, I don't give them any value, but if I belonged to an organization that did, I'd really start believing I'd have a spiritual experience. I'd wake up feeling like, wow, Eckankar works because it doesn't make you have experiences that are impossible to have. What about soul travel, visiting higher planes of existence? Lane swallows his pizza. I am skeptical of paranormal claims because I believe we need to shave more with Occam's razor. The principle of competing theories developed in the 14th century by a guy named William of Ockham, who said that if you have competing theories, go for the simplest theory first, if it explains the issue fully. An example, I claim the reason I missed our appointment last night was because Elvis was on Venus and sucked me up into a space capsule. That's one explanation. The other one is I overslept. Among those two explanations, Occam's razor points to the simpler one, I overslept. The problem is that nobody uses Occam's razor when it comes to spirituality. We have a tendency to want to inflate our lives with spiritual meaning. And skepticism is not much fun. A skeptic goes to an Eckankar meeting or anybody's meditation meeting and says, well, now wait a second. Are you sure that you saw the astral body of Rami Nuri? Maybe it was just some neurons firing in the right part of your brain. Or maybe you had too much dopamine in the frontal lobes. Or maybe you took an Excedrin 4 hours ago. We don't want that kind of explanation. It's a beautiful sunny day, sitting at our outside table, high above Camino del Mar, surrounded by sky and ocean. I feel as if we're gods feasting on petty human concerns. I ask, ever so casually, is it true that you have some friends who are Ekis? Oh yeah. How do they justify that you are doing things that might damage the group? They differentiate the message from the medium. They say the message works for me. The contemplation works for me. Paul Twitchell's the past. We've evolved out of that. And this is also why Harold Klemp is writing so much books, almost to replace the... Anyway, they say you can never damage the X spirit because it's life. So I may be damaging the organization, but the real essence of Eckankar is not the organization. It's the Ek, that inner spirit. How did you meet these people? They read my book. One interesting guy I met was Jerry Mulvin. He was a pro bowler as well as a higher initiate in Eckankar. In 1979, he called me from Northridge, where he was living at his girlfriend's aunt's house. He had read the book and wanted me to visit him. After I talked to him for a couple of hours, Jerry said, Dave, why don't you start your own religion? With all this information you have, you could start your own thing. I go, Jerry, I can't do that. Third eye patch, turban, the flowing robe. I can't do it. 2 years later, I got a letter from a guy in Canada saying he discovered a genuine guru. So I asked, who is this enlightened being? It was Jerry Mulvin. He offshooted from Eckankar and founded this religion called the Divine Science of Light and Sound. He's now in Scottsdale, Arizona. For $100 per year, he gives you the divine connection. If he can't take your soul back to God, he improves your bowling game, money back guarantee. We both laughed so loud at Lane's joke, the couple at the table next to us, who had been covertly eyeing the tape recorder, stared at us openly. I wrote to Jerry, way to go, Jerry. 2 years ago, you're living at your girlfriend's aunt's house, not making much money on the pro bowling scene, and now you're God. And what was Jerry's response? Lane rolls his eyes. Classic, he said. Some of us live the spiritual lives, others intellectualize it. Signed, the Master. Another former Ekis named Gary Olson started the Master Path. He's touring the Southwest as we speak. Another man named Sri Michael Turner in Tuscan claimed to be the 974th living master of the Midnight Sun. I keep discovering more and more offshoots in India as well as here. It's like a virus. It keeps reproducing itself. Oh, damn it, David Blaine, are you around today? You should see all the ones I have now. You know the ins and outs of how religions are organized. And you're a charismatic person. Jerry Mulvin's suggestion that you start your own cult must have been intriguing on some level. I bet you fantasized about it. Do you think it would be an easy thing to do? The waiter arrives with our check, and Lane and I bicker over who's going to pay for it, and nobody wins, so we just let it sit there. Lane's still a member of Kadhasawami, but he's been reluctant to talk about it, beyond mentioning that his guru, Sharan Singh's death in 1990 has thrown him into a state of crisis. Other students of Radhasamis have objected to Lane's critical stance on the Radhasami tradition, A Critical History of Guru Successorship, published by Garland. Clearly, Lane is not a blind follower, but I'm amazed that after all the dirt he's dug up on religions, he could be seriously involved in any spiritual path. I ask him how his research into cults has affected his own beliefs. My research has helped because it's made me more discriminating, more critical-minded. At this stage of the game, I can't buy the crap that permeates religion. Not just new religions, but religion in general. There's so much shit. I only accept that thing which I can verify or that thing which I consider to be somewhat genuine. I think of Rumi, the great Persian poet, who said, with all these false coins abounding, there's got to be something genuine in the midst of it. Again, I am reminded of Houdini. I really like Houdini, this guy. Whose interest in spiritualism was awakened with his dearly loved mother's death. Houdini longed to communicate with her beyond the grave. But while his friend author Conan Doyle and other enthusiasts were impressed with the supernatural sideshows of mediums, Houdini, with his vast knowledge of magic techniques, could duplicate the effects. He took to unmasking frauds, but always with the hopes of finding a true medium. In The Life and the Many Deaths of Harry Houdini, Ruth Brandon writes, he terribly wanted to be convinced that he could not, I don't know what that says, that he could not, something was his tragedy. I wonder if this is not Lane's tragedy too. They asked Dave what he believes. I'm a mystic, agnostic, materialist. What it means is that I ultimately don't know. And in my unknowingness, I like to explore how much more I don't know. Is this a scary position? I love it. I love unknowingness. Talking to these echoes, the unconscious, rational, jaded Dodie faded out. And this other little Dodie inside me was starting to feel an incredible seduction. I wanted Bettina Yellman's calm. I wanted Charles Richards' benevolence. I wanted Kevin McMahon's assurance. I like you, and I'm enjoying our talk, but nothing you're saying is very seductive. You know what I mean? Lane drives me back to Hillcrest. In my copy of The Making of a Spiritual Movement, he signs himself, the Cal Force, Dave. The Cal Force, remember, is the power of negativity. Lane can be such a card. The following evening, when the airport shuttle drops me off in front of my apartment, 5 guys are smoking crack beside the dumpster. It's hard to leave the magical vistas of Del Mar. It was hard to leave Eckankar too. I turn on the stereo and stare out the window. Roseanne Cash sings, some dreams die with dignity. They fade out clean and quietly. But some won't let you. Let them go. It's raining. In her golden-tongued wisdom, Rosanna continues to sing. A cold, hard rain comes pouring down. It wasn't like this last time around. There's no calm center to this storm, and it continues to rain. In January, it rains for 26 days. The skies themselves seems to be weeping with loss. Just when I thought the story was over, a new development pops up like the arm jutting from the grave at the end of Carrie. Lane tells me that former living Eggmaster Darwin Gross is appearing February 11th at the Best Western Hotel. Every thriller these days has a false ending and then a real ending, to the point that when I watch a pre-Carrie film, I'm disappointed at how easily chaos is defeated. With some trepidation, I returned to San Diego, exhausted from 2 months' immersion in religion. I have a nightmare in which Lane and I go to the wedding reception of a couple we do not know, and Lane abandons me. The mastership of Darwin Gross is a black cloud in Eckankar history, a history that Eckankar wants to erase. Nowhere in any of the Eckankar press materials is Gross mentioned. I wonder how long it takes new Eckes to even learn of his existence. When word got around that I was doing this article, I got an odd phone call from Don Jin, the California Regional Ex-Spiritual Aide. He didn't bring up David Lane, but he requested that I not dwell on Darwin Gross. I really hadn't planned to write about him at all. Gross's rise to power was steeped in controversy from the beginning. When Paul Twitchell suddenly died in September of 1971, he left no words as to who his successor should be. Then his widow, Gail Atkinson, had a vision in the night in which Twitchell named Gross. In October, at a seminar in Las Vegas, Gross was revealed to be the new living Eckmaster when Atkinson walked over to him and handed him a blue carnation. Gross actually received the mantle on the inner planes when he was handed not a flower, but the rod of power. Various Eckes say they witnessed the ceremony. In one illustration, the rod of power is depicted as a glowing white wand. When a group of Eckes and I went to see the Bloomington, Indiana premiere of Star Wars, we were thrilled by the lightsabers of the Jedi Knights. They looked just like the rod of power. To top it off, their white helmets bore an insignia that was remarkably similar to Eckankar's circular Eck logo. Star Wars was no ordinary action flick, we concluded, but a profound spiritual saga. May the Force be with you. Because Gross had been in Eckankar less than 2 years, his appointment was shocked and disturbed many Eckes. Some left the movement. A few months later, Gross and Twitchell's widow married, sending more ripples of confusion throughout the fold. Not long afterwards, I joined Eckankar, unaware of the dissension. Whenever I saw Gross and Atkinson, I would be seated in an auditorium surrounded by thousands of avid followers, each hoping at some point to receive the darshan, the master's gaze. Gross was in the habit of wearing light blue leisure suits, and men throughout the audience mimicked his attire. Outsiders would think they had stumbled into a convention of traveling salesmen. My husband, who had never heard of Atkinson's before, sees her as a kind of 60s super vixen, like Pussy Galore. But the woman I remember was mousy with a broad smile. No Bond girl was she. Ellen Burstyn, maybe. I would raise my head to the stage in rapt silence, devouring every word the Grosses spoke. I could almost picture the legendary rod of power in Darwin's hand. They were gods to me, and one doesn't question the mating patterns of gods. Gross and Gail Twitchell divorced in 1978. In October 1981, Eckes were again floored when Gross announced his resignation in the living Eckmaster, but not without first signing a contract that gave him a salary of $65,000 for life, full medical and dental coverage, use of a company car, and entertainment expenses. His new title was President of Eckankar. The rod of power was passed on to Harold Klemp. Within 2 years, Klemp fired Gross, accusing him of negativity, spiritual decay, and embezzlement. Apparently, says Lane, Darwin took $2.5 million and put it into a front corporation in Oregon called Dharma Corporation. He basically took Eckankar's money while saying it was really for Eckankar purposes. Excommunicated from Eckankar, his lifetime agreement terminated. Gross was suddenly penniless. His books were suppressed, and he was forbidden to associate himself with Eckankar or Eckankar teachings in any way, including the use of trademark terms such as Eck, living Eckmaster, and Eckankar. When Gross protested, he was slapped with a lawsuit for business impropriety and copyright infringement. All hail our mighty Lord, the great flying spaghetti monster. Hail, he who was boiled for our sins. Ramen. We are leaving work. Have a good day, everyone. You too, Joe. Gross continues to work as a spiritual master with a small group of devoted followers, many of them former Eggists. He publishes books through an organization called Be Good to Yourself, located in Las Vegas. Home study discourses and musical tapes are also available. Much of Gross's current teachings center around the easy listening jazz he performs on the Vibes. Gross's uplifting music is claimed to have miraculous healing powers. The program Lane and I attend at the Best Western Hanalei is called The Universal Basics of Life Through Music. It costs $35 at the door. This is, of course, back in the day. Saturday afternoon, when we arrived at the hotel, Lane keeps disappearing into the bathroom. He and Gross have been sparring since 1977. As late as December 1993, Gross sent out a memo to all his readers defending Paul Twitchell and the corporation he started against Lane's attacks. Gross's fastidious avoidance of the copyrighted term Eckankar is noticeably awkward and circuitous. Lane has countered with a point-by-point rebuttal when God responds, Sri Darwin Gross versus David Lane, which he's included in his new book, Gecko Came from Venus. While Lane is in the bathroom, I try to no avail to get permission to photograph the event. Gross's young, perky assistant, Dawn, explains, frankly, there have been lawsuits. She agrees to provide us with an official photograph of Gross at the Vibes, and I leave to find Lane. He's sitting on a couch in the small lobby outside the conference room I urge. Come on, Dave, it's starting. I practically have to pull him into the concert. We take our seats among the 50 or so other seekers, many of whom have flown in for the event. Because again, people come all over the world for this, right? It's very important. Dawn is finishing an applied kinesiology demonstration of the power of Gross's music. A volunteer raises one arm straight out to the side, and Dawn easily pushes it down. Then she asks him to think about Gross's music as he again holds out his arm. This time, the arm doesn't budge no matter how hard she pushes down on it. See, she exclaims. We close our eyes and chant "You" together for several minutes. Gross enters and takes his position behind the gold-toned Vibes. Remembering him in his better days, thin and attractive, I am shocked by the corpulent, aging man standing before me coughing. He reminds me of the bloated near-death Elvis, only fatter and older. Well, that was mean. He jokes about his Nevada cold, blaming it on the dust from the Indian burial grounds being dug up to build housing. Okay. Lane looks like he swallowed a mouse, gritting and biting his finger. Gross's movements are frail and slow as he removes his dark blue jacket to reveal a short-sleeved white shirt and tan pants held up with wide red suspenders. Accompanied by keyboardist and devotee Ron Kurz, Gross begins with blues in E-flat. The music is great, lethargic and soothing, of course. The kind of music one should listen to in a cocktail lounge with an umbrella drink. Gross smiles to himself as he hits the Vibes. He seems gently ecstatic, but so tired. When he finishes the song, he takes off his shoes to be closer to the keys. The atmosphere in the room is homey and protective. After a few more tunes, Gross and Kurz are joined by vocalist Kim Driggs, an attractive woman with dark shaggy hair. In a husky voice, smooth as malt whiskey, she sings, Don't blame me for falling in love with you. I'm under your spell, but how can I help it? There is a double edge to this torch song. From the way she keeps glancing affectionately over at Gross, it is the master's spell that Driggs can't be blamed for falling under. When she begins her next selection, My Funny Valentine, I lose all objectivity. Valentine's Day, my birthday, is only 3 days away. I vacantly stare at Lane's tanned, hairy legs, nostalgic for the boyfriends who played this song for me. The loss of my old loves and Gross's loss of status become merged in an ineffable sadness. After she finished, Gross says, She can belt one out, can't she? I hope you all had your seatbelts fastened. Even more moving is Driggs' rendition of Somewhere Over the Rainbow. Gross sits this one out on a rattan stool, his arms folded over his huge stomach, lost in thought. When Driggs gets to the line, Away above the chimney tops, that's where you'll find me. I focus on Gross's blurbleless belly and red suspenders. He looks like Santa, I think. Like a fallen Santa. Lane has tears in his eyes. I lean and whisper to him, "You're so opaque. I'm surprised by my cruelty. Sitting in this pathetic room with this riotoriously floral turquoise and purple carpet feels as if nobody's dreams will ever come true." I keep waiting for Gross to give a speech, but he never does. We zone out on lounge music for an hour and a half. Then Dog walks to the front of the room and says, "That's it." I ask Lane if he's going to introduce himself. Lane shakes his head. I don't want to tweak his day. He's got his music. He's having a good time. So I walk over to Gross myself and shake his hand. I used to be an Eckankar, I tell him. Discomfort spreads across his face as I continue. You were the master most of the time I was in it. Holding my hand, he looks deep into my eyes and says, I'm still the master. I always have been. I never stopped, not even for a minute, even though they, pardon my expression, treated me like shit. As I walk away, he yells after me, hang in there. Sri Harold Klemp has immense financial resources available to guide the spiritual lives of his tens of thousands of believers. Gail Atkinson, who has long since broken with Eckankar, is said to live in wealthy seclusion in Palm Springs. Lane and I drive to La Jolla for lean-in upscale Mexican food. Sipping his virgin strawberry margarita, Lane says, I got a sense of authenticity when he played his vibes. Like that's who he really was, a musician, instead of trying to be a master. One of the reasons he may have relinquished his spiritual role to Harold is that it didn't jibe with him. He may like the trappings, but not the actual duty of it. I really enjoyed the music, but it was kind of sad. Life's kind of sad. 40 people in a hotel named Hanalei in San Diego for a man who used to draw thousands. He's big, coughing, not in the best of health, and he doesn't have any money. Yet he has a sweetness to it. It was like an outpost of spirituality. I felt the world has gone by, but these people are still there. Expert from a letter sent to informants who spoke with David Lane during his research into John Roger Hinkins. Scumbags! A friend from La Jolla gave me a copy of this article that David Lane is writing called the JR Controversy. All that junk you told him made me sick! All that junk you gave Lane to write down came out of your own filthy minds and mouths, and you know filthy mouths must be cleaned out, don't you? If I were any of you, I'd be very careful where I go and what I do and who I talk to. You wouldn't want anyone to get hurt now, would you? Don't you all have innocent friends visit you and live near you? I'd sign this, but you scumbags aren't worth much more of my effort. Just a bit more effort and then it ends. It's going to be interesting to see how this information gets back to me. In days of old, the barrier bad news to the king was done away with. I also have the evidence that David Christopher Lane is an informant for the FBI, apparently a gay one, by the way, and is being financed by them to do his dirty research. CC, the Watchers who are everywhere. And I guess we are still here as Watchers, and we will still continue to deep dive into this cult as we go along. That was basically a very big introduction into Paul Twitchell. This cult, we've heard from some ex-members. We heard from David Lane. And, sum it up, Paul Twitchell, big lying asshole. All right, lied about everything. Stole every piece of writing he's ever put together, all plagiarized. Lied to his wife about how old he was. Can't figure out what fucking day the dude's actually born. No one figured it out till after he died, and then everyone went and looked up the birth certificate. You know what I mean? Huge liar, huge piece of shit. And for some reason, we're all supposed to be over here going, yeah, he's a great guy. We should all look up to him. and the likes. Eckankar religion, very much based on all the other religions, just basically molded together into one big religion. It goes by openness and not having to switch your religion to their religion in order for it to prey on the most people as possible. And people have been trying to speak out against this cult and speak up and say, hey guys, pay attention. This is dangerous. Don't join this fucking thing since at least the 80s. So I ask that if you were not listening back then, that you listen now. Please do give this a like, subscribe if you are new here. I would love it if you joined our fabulous, amazing members. All of the beautiful people do. And you don't want to be ugly like Paul Twitchell. So hit that join button. And I am going to be back next week where we are going to have lots of fun with some log house. We're going to have lots of fun looking deeper into Eckankar. And I think I'm also going to have something on passive for you. So stay tuned for that. And have a wonderful weekend. Mwah. Bye. Don't join this fucking cult, damn it.